This blue orb possessed a mysterious power. All someone had to do was place it in the bathtub while taking a bath. By the time they stepped out, they would transform into the appearance they had in their previous life. Some people came out of the bath as dogs. But when this man finished bathing, he transformed into a beautiful top celebrity. Ever since he was young, his grandmother had always told him that people must never lose their original appearance. Whatever form they were born with was the form they should live in. That was why she firmly refused to let him get plastic surgery. But ever since he was a child, he'd always admired the celebrities on television. Whenever he told others about his dream, they'd only laugh at him. Probably because of his appearance, he still remembered watching a music program with his older brother when he was young. One particular performer instantly caught his attention. She wasn't noticeably more beautiful than the people around her, yet she had an overwhelming presence, as though declaring she was the true ruler of the stage. Whenever she performed, he couldn't take his eyes off the screen. He even told his brother, "I want to become an entertainer too. You said I was talented when I performed at the talent show, remember?" But his brother told him that someone with his appearance could never become an entertainer. Unless he tried again in his next life, he simply wasn't handsome enough. And whenever he mentioned getting plastic surgery, his grandmother would start saying strange things. But when he thought about it carefully, appearance might not have been that important. After all, his idol hadn't captivated him with her looks either. As long as he kept working hard, he was certain he'd eventually find his opportunity. So he continued sending out applications and attending auditions, believing that someday someone would recognize his potential. "My name is Kim Sang-hyun. I'm 20 years old, and it's a pleasure to meet you." Kim Sang-hyun had repeated those words more times than he could remember, after attending more auditions than he could count. Today, he arrived at yet another entertainment agency for an audition. The judges said that his skills were good, but he didn't quite have the looks for it. They also thought he was already too old to begin training from scratch. Even so, they reluctantly let him pass the first round and said that the final results would be sent by text message. After finally passing an audition for once, Sang-hyun desperately hoped everything would work out this time. Just then, a message suddenly arrived on his phone. Sang-hyun nervously opened it and discovered that the company wanted him to prepare several documents and send them over. But a few days later, he received a call informing him that he had failed the audition. In that instant, he was completely crushed. When he thought about it, even legitimate entertainment agencies rejected him the moment they saw his personal records. If that fight had never happened years ago, his face would never have been injured. Before he realized it, Sang-hyun had arrived at the fortune-telling shop run by his grandmother. He hadn't seen her in a long time, and he also missed her cooking. Sang-hyun stepped into the room, but his grandmother was nowhere to be seen. There was only an unfamiliar woman standing near the entrance. Confused, he asked, "Are you a customer?" The woman turned around, looked directly at him and asked, "Are you Kim Sang-hyun?" Sang-hyun stared at her in confusion, unable to understand how she knew his name. Once she confirmed his identity, the woman immediately became excited and began looking him up and down. "You've grown so tall," she then explained. "I used to be a regular customer here. I stopped visiting after I started working, but I still keep in touch with your grandmother occasionally. She talks about you all the time. Your grandmother just stepped out, and I actually came here to find you." She then asked, "Since you're already here, I'll get straight to the point. Do you have some time right now?" But Sang-hyun didn't even know this woman, so he couldn't imagine what she possibly wanted from him. The woman then pulled out a business card, handed it to him, and invited him to visit her company. The moment Sang-hyun read what was printed on the card, he felt as though he were dreaming. The woman was Han Ok-yeon, the operations director of Parong Entertainment. As far as Sang-hyun knew, Parong was one of the largest entertainment agencies in the industry. Sang-hyun then led her to a tea table beside the fortune-telling shop and told her about his audition history. He had occasionally been accepted by smaller agencies, but after spending some time as a trainee, he was always dropped shortly before his debut. To his surprise, Han Ok-yeon mocked him for repeatedly getting fired. She even knew that he had bullied another student back in school. The incident had taken place during high school, and once it was placed on his record, Sang-hyun had eventually been expelled. It was the darkest part of his past. So how did Han Ok-yeon know about it? His grandmother would never reveal something like that to a customer. Had this woman investigated him beforehand? Yet, Han Ok-yeon was the one criticizing him for not mentioning it earlier. Sang-hyun couldn't understand why she was still willing to talk to him, when she already knew everything about his past. Just then, Han Ok-yeon revealed that she planned to bring him into the company as a trainee. Sang-hyun was completely stunned. All he had to do was pass one simple test. Han Ok-yeon then took him to a hotel. Wasn't this supposed to be a test? Had she meant something other than an audition? Why had she brought him to a hotel and even booked a room by the hour for the two of them? Could her identity have been fake? Sang-hyun suddenly began to feel that this woman was dangerous. He regretted following her there and even considered running away immediately. Even so, he forced himself to follow her into the room. Once inside, Han Ok-yeon opened her bag and began searching through it. She then pulled out a small blue orb. She explained that it was a bath bomb and instructed Sang-hyun to place it in the bathtub while soaking in the water. Sang-hyun stared at her in disbelief. Wasn't the test supposed to involve singing or dancing? Why did she want him to take a bath? Han Ok-yeon assured him that the object wouldn't harm his body. Sang-hyun looked at her in disbelief, unable to figure out what she was trying to do. Noticing his hesitation, Han Ok-yeon deliberately provoked him. "You can go home if you don't want to do it. I guess you're not that desperate to become an idol after all." Sang-hyun knew she was trying to bait him, but he still snatched the bath bomb from her hand. He then opened the bathroom door and prepared to go inside. As Han Ok-yeon sat down on the bed, she reminded him that his entire body had to be soaked from head to toe. Sang-hyun entered the bathroom and turned on the bathtub faucet. He decided to follow her instructions for now. Given his current situation, he was in no position to be picky. Even if she turned out to be a scammer, what difference would it make? He was already used to having his hopes crushed. If someone was willing to give a person like him a chance, he was prepared to do anything. Just then, Han Ok-yeon's phone suddenly began to ring. The person calling her was her boss. After an unknown amount of time, Sang-hyun finally came to his senses. He wondered whether he had fallen asleep in the bathtub. He had only taken a bath, yet it felt as though a long time had passed. When he looked down at his hands, he discovered that his skin had become incredibly smooth. His shoulders also felt strangely heavy. Could this have been the effect of the bath bomb? Filled with confusion, Sang-hyun walked over to the mirror, but the person reflected in it was a beautiful woman with long hair. Sang-hyun stared at the mirror in disbelief, unable to recognize the person standing before him. Han Ok-yeon, who was still sitting on the bed, noticed that he had been inside for far too long. She began urging him to open the bathroom door. But the moment Han Ok-yeon saw Sang-hyun's new appearance, even she looked completely shocked. Sang-hyun marched toward her, grabbed her by the collar, and angrily demanded to know what she had done to his body. "You said that thing was harmless. What the hell was it? Anyone looking at me right now would think I'm a woman." Han Ok-yeon quickly raised her hands and admitted that she was also confused and needed a moment to understand the situation. Meanwhile, Sang-hyun was trembling with rage. Han Ok-yeon hurriedly explained, "Let me start from the beginning and explain what that bath bomb was supposed to do. It has a special ability that allows someone to return to the appearance they had in their previous life. I only told you the instructions exactly as they were explained to me. Didn't anyone ever tell you that you were a beautiful woman in your previous life?" Hearing this only made Sang-hyun even angrier. Was this woman seriously playing a joke on him? But when he thought about it carefully, someone really had told him that he had been a beautiful woman in his previous life. Sang-hyun remembered his grandmother once telling him that his current appearance was not suited for television. But his grandmother had also said that if he had the face from his previous life, it would be perfect for seducing people. At the time, Sang-hyun thought she was making fun of him. He accused her of becoming senile, claimed her fortune-telling was getting worse, and even told her to close the shop. Remembering those words, Sang-hyun curiously asked Han Ok-yeon, "Did my grandmother tell you all of this too? What exactly is your relationship with her, and why would she tell you so much about me?" But right now, the most important thing was returning to his original appearance. He had no intention of living in this body for the rest of his life. Han Ok-yeon moved closer and assured him that there was no need to worry because there had to be a way to change him back. But when she suddenly moved so close and stared intensely at him, Sang-hyun's heart began pounding. Han Ok-yeon exclaimed, "You're unbelievably beautiful. You've completely exceeded my expectations. Out of everyone I've ever seen, your looks are easily top tier." Hearing such a direct compliment made Sang-hyun's face turn bright red. Even more unbelievably, Han Ok-yeon announced that he had passed the test and wanted him to join the company in his current appearance. After Sang-hyun repeatedly demanded a solution, Han Ok-yeon finally took out a small box. She explained that the red bath bomb inside would return him to his original appearance. However, she told him to think carefully about whether he wanted to join their company. Before leaving, she added that she was extremely satisfied with him and hoped to see him again. Once Han Ok-yeon left, Sang-hyun immediately prepared to fill the bathtub with warm water. But just then, the phone inside the room suddenly rang. It turned out it was already checkout time. The moment Sang-hyun heard this, he felt as though his entire world had collapsed. He was forced to wander the streets in a miserable state. Desperately searching for somewhere with a bathtub, Sang-hyun suddenly thought of his grandmother, believing that she might know what was happening to him. But when he returned to the fortune-telling shop, his grandmother wouldn't pick up, no matter how many times he called. A woman from the neighborhood told him that his grandmother had left on a business trip, but she had no idea when she would return. All she knew was that his grandmother had gone to the countryside, where there was no phone reception. With no other choice, Sang-hyun returned home. But even after lying down on his bed, he couldn't fall asleep and just kept scrolling through his phone. He desperately needed a bathtub because his entire body had to be submerged before he could change back. His mind was in complete chaos, and he was too frightened to even look at the lower half of his body. With his current appearance, there was no way he could prove that he was Kim Sang-hyun. The entire situation was so ridiculous that it felt like a dream. Perhaps everything would return to normal once he woke up. But in the next moment, he suddenly felt a desperate need to use the bathroom. No matter how much he wanted to avoid it, he eventually had to face reality. The first thing Sang-hyun thought about the next morning was meeting Han Ok-yeon as soon as possible. When he finally appeared before her again, Han Ok-yeon was rendered speechless. Sang-hyun looked so exhausted and disheveled that he practically resembled a homeless person. As Han Ok-yeon led him upstairs, Sang-hyun looked around in amazement. He had never imagined that he would one day step inside such a massive entertainment company. Han Ok-yeon first found him a tracksuit to wear. When Sang-hyun put it on, he discovered that it fit him surprisingly well. The moment he saw the company logo printed on the clothes, he finally began to feel like a real trainee at the agency. Han Ok-yeon then brought him to the president's office. Inside sat a middle-aged man in a white shirt who seemed to already know Sang-hyun's name. The moment Sang-hyun saw his face, he was shocked to realize that the man was Oh Baek-jun. Oh Baek-jun was not only a legendary first-generation idol, but also the founder of his own entertainment agency. He explained that the company they were currently in was a subsidiary of Pairing Entertainment that he had personally founded. On top of that, the company was backed by a major corporate conglomerate. Sang-hyun suddenly remembered that Han Ok-yeon's business card had indeed displayed the company's logo. Han Ok-yeon was even offering to let him start immediately as a trainee without attending another audition. Oh Baek-jun also told him that he had already watched the audition videos Sang-hyun had previously sent to other agencies. Sang-hyun had been extremely lucky because the bath bomb that awakened a person's previous life appearance didn't work on everyone. Only people with a special constitution would react to it. The red bath bomb Han Ok-yeon had given him, meanwhile, could restore his original appearance. Hearing this suddenly reminded Sang-hyun of the story about Onrum-san that his grandmother had once told him. Oh Baek-jun explained that the company was preparing to debut its first girl group and needed several highly talented trainees. But Sang-hyun was still a man. Only his body had become female. So how could he possibly cooperate with them and become a female entertainer? Besides, male and female idols were expected to pursue completely different paths. Oh Baek-jun then asked, "What do you think is the most important requirement for becoming an idol?" Sang-hyun believed that talent and character were both important, although luck was equally essential. In all his years, he had never seen another industry capable of sending someone from heaven to hell in a single second. Other agencies had previously considered signing him, but they had all rejected him because of his history of bullying another student. Oh Baek-jun made it clear that if Sang-hyun still had his original appearance, Han Ok-yeon would never have approached him, and the company would never have noticed Kim Sang-hyun at all. He wanted Sang-hyun to think carefully about whether he wished to continue living as a former bully no one was willing to accept, or using his new body to start over. Sang-hyun remembered secretly asking his older brother to enroll him in a music academy when he was young. His brother thought it was humiliating, but Sang-hyun argued that being unable to afford the academy was even more embarrassing. He even complained that their grandmother spent all day dealing with wandering spirits. His brother immediately responded by beating him up. The moment Sang-hyun saw his brother clench his fist, he quickly covered his head with both hands. Still, he knew that despite acting tough, his brother would eventually help him. When Sang-hyun arrived at school the next day, the first person he went to see was Eun Suk-young. He remembered that Suk-young had previously asked him to help coach the members of the school's dance club. However, she was worried that Sang-hyun would become busy after joining the music academy, so she only wanted him to guide them occasionally. Unlike him, the other members didn't dream of becoming idols and merely treated dancing as a hobby. Just then, a classmate named Han began mocking him from behind. Han sneered, that Sang-hyun seemed desperate to make sure everyone knew he wanted to become an idol. Sang-hyun was not someone who allowed others to push him around, so he immediately fired back. "What makes you so special? You walk around every day acting like you're better than everyone else." Han was left speechless and could not think of a response. He eventually claimed that he would never waste his time on something completely impossible like Sang-hyun did. But Sang-hyun knew he was nothing like someone who had been born with a silver spoon in his mouth. That afternoon, Sang-hyun arrived at the audition venue on the second floor. The judges initially assumed that he was also a member of the dance club, but Sang-hyun explained that he wasn't an official member and had only coached them briefly. One of the female judges said that he had great potential as a dance instructor and asked whether he had considered pursuing that career. But Sang-hyun firmly replied, "I believe becoming an idol is the path that suits me best." The judges then asked whether any of the younger dancers he had coached showed exceptional potential. Sang-hyun soon prepared to demonstrate the talent he had practiced. But while getting ready, he accidentally overheard the judges discussing him. Before they had even seen what he could do, they were already tearing him down, mocking his short legs and claiming he had a rat face. Until then, Sang-hyun had never cared what anyone said because he firmly believed that becoming an idol was the right path for him. Recently, however, he had started feeling anxious. The older he became, the harder it was to pass an audition. Just then, another audition rejection arrived on his phone. A classmate behind him asked whether he had missed school 2 days earlier to attend yet another audition. Han approached him with a smug grin. Catching Sang-hyun off guard, Han suddenly snatched away his phone and mocked him for becoming so insecure. Even worse, Han began reading the contents of the phone without permission, making Sang-hyun furious. In the very next moment, Han reached out and shoved his hand against Sang-hyun's head. He then mocked him. "You fail one audition, and now you're taking it out on innocent people. Anyone with eyes can see the truth. You're the only one who refuses to face reality. How old are you already? Don't you feel sorry for your parents?" Before Han could finish speaking, Sang-hyun finally lost control and started fighting him. His eye was injured during the brawl, yet he was still forced to pay compensation to the other student. The teacher told Sang-hyun that the other student's nose had been broken and claimed that the physical injuries were even more serious than the emotional damage. Sang-hyun had no idea what kind of background the other student came from, but even the teacher seemed to find the situation difficult to handle. The moment Sang-hyun saw the medical bill, he froze in shock. After his grandmother learned what had happened, she was forced to use the money she had saved for her own surgery to pay the compensation. However, she insisted that the matter couldn't simply end there. Sang-hyun lowered his head, overwhelmed with guilt toward his grandmother, but she comforted him, saying, "Don't look so defeated. This wasn't your fault." However, when Sang-hyun returned to school, even Eun Suk-yeon criticized him for not enduring the abuse a little longer. Everyone already knew how that student normally treated Sang-hyun. But because Sang-hyun had always silently tolerated everything, the moment he fought back, everyone suddenly turned on him. Suk-kyung, however, only meant that he needed to act more carefully for the sake of his future. Sang-hyun suddenly froze. Why wasn't he allowed to live fearlessly, like the people who never back down from anyone? Had he truly been the one in the wrong? Because of that student's provocation, his family's savings had been completely drained, and all the efforts Sang-hyun had put in over the years had gone to waste. The thought filled him with crushing guilt, but it was already too late for regret. Even after the compensation had been paid, the incident showed no signs of ending. Countless rumors continued to spread, and the situation became increasingly unfavorable for Sang-hyun. By the time he decided to drop out, everyone at school already viewed him as a violent delinquent. From that moment onward, even the entertainment agencies that had previously accepted him began throwing him out. Just as Sang-hyun began wondering whether he should abandon his dream, Eun Suk-yeon suddenly sent him a message. It was only then that he realized no one had ever truly believed in him. Was his dream really nothing more than a joke that would end before it even began? Looking at Oh Baek-jun standing before him, Sang-hyun refused to retreat like he had in the past. This time, he would do everything possible to achieve his dream. He still didn't know whether he could succeed with this new body, but he promised to give it everything he had. Han Ok-yeon then gave Sang-hyun a tour of the company. However, one question had bothered him from the beginning. How had they obtained all of his personal information? Just then, Han Ok-yeon brought him to the area reserved for the female trainees. She explained that if Sang-hyun were still a man, he would never be allowed inside. Han Ok-yeon then covered her mouth and warned him, "Don't use the fact that you're a woman now as an excuse to sneak around and do things you shouldn't. Hearing this completely startled Song-hyun, leaving him frozen on the spot. Even now, he hadn't adjusted to his new body. Above all, hearing a girl's voice whenever he opened his mouth was something he still couldn't accept. Han Ok-yeon replied, "You should get used to it as quickly as possible, because we're no longer allowed inside the male trainee area." For now, the secret that Sang-hyun had originally been a man was known only to Han Ok-yeon and Oh Baek-jun. From this point forward, he would have to live among countless female trainees while pretending to be a real woman. Just then, Han Ok-yeon received a phone call and had to leave temporarily, telling Song-hyun to wait for her in the first-floor lobby. Left alone in the unfamiliar surroundings, Song-hyun realized that he should have expected a situation like this sooner or later. He casually glanced toward the practice room in front of him and saw several girls rehearsing inside. But then he remembered Han Ok-yeon warning him that the area was completely off-limits to men, leaving him unsure whether he should go in. Meanwhile, after finishing the call, Han Ok-yeon returned to the president's office. The president handed her a file and asked her to check it carefully. The moment she read its contents, Han Ok-yeon froze. One of the company's female trainees had attended the same high school as Song-hyun. At the same time, Song-hyun noticed a girl inside the practice room who looked extremely familiar. He walked closer and blurted out, "Park So-ae, what are you doing here?" The girl stared at him in complete surprise. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" Only then did Song-hyun suddenly remember that he currently looked like a woman. He immediately turned around and ran away, unable to understand why So-ae was there. By the time he looked up again, he had already reached the elevators. Han Ok-yeon happened to be waiting for him there. Sang-hyun quickly stepped inside the elevator, but just as he was about to press the close button, Han Ok-yeon quietly asked, "What's your relationship with So-ae? How do you know her name?" Sang-hyun instantly broke into a cold sweat, unable to think of an answer. Han Ok-yeon then guessed, "Were the two of you dating?" Song-hyun spun around and hurriedly replied, "She's just an underclassman I know. I heard that she had joined an entertainment agency, but I never expected her to be here." So-ae probably knew the old Sang-hyun as well, since almost everyone at their school had heard the rumors about his bullying incident. The thought immediately made Sang-hyun panic. What would happen if she discovered his true identity? But Han Ok-yeon stared at him blankly and asked, "What exactly are you worried about? With the way you look now, how could she possibly connect you to Kim Sang-hyun? I doubt anyone would recognize you, even if you spent your whole life right next to them." Only then did Song-hyun realize that both his appearance and gender had completely changed. Han Ok-yeon then reminded him that after the strange way he had behaved, So-ae had probably already decided that he was a total weirdo. With that, Han Ok-yeon turned around and began leading him somewhere else. But Sang-hyun's mind was in complete chaos. He didn't want to go anywhere and only wanted to return home to calm down. While riding the bus, he repeatedly reminded himself that he needed to adjust to this body before his official training began, especially since he still knew almost nothing about his new self. As Song-hyun turned to look out the window, the two people sitting across from him were curiously staring at him. Even the passengers behind him seemed to be whispering about his appearance. His chest also felt unusually heavy, constantly making him want to lean forward. After returning home, Song-hyun immediately ordered clothes and shoes that would fit his new body and requested same-day delivery. The young delivery woman was visibly startled the moment she saw him, but she quickly smiled, handed him the clothes, and even gave him a discount of 10,000 won. Once he returned to his room, Song-hyun remained stunned for a long time. Was this really the power of being beautiful? He had never experienced treatment like this before. Even the part-time worker at the convenience store downstairs, who had never greeted him in the past, suddenly treated him completely differently. The employee even claimed that the items Song-hyun had purchased happened to be part of a buy-one-get-one-free promotion. Song-hyun entered the bathroom and carefully studied his reflection. He had to admit that the face in the mirror was almost impossibly beautiful. Unable to resist his curiosity, he lifted his shirt to examine his new body more closely. He hesitated for a moment, but then realized he would have to remove his clothes when he showered anyway. Once he finally undressed, Sang-hyun discovered that the body was just as flawless as the face. He ended up staring at himself in the mirror for more than 10 minutes. The next morning, Sang-hyun slowly opened his eyes. Everything still felt like a dream, yet something seemed strangely wrong. He suddenly shot upright and pulled away the blanket to inspect his body. Only then did he remember that he was currently a woman. Adjusting to this body in such a short time was clearly going to be difficult. Startled by the realization, Song-hyun remained seated on the bed for a long time before finally calming down. Today was his first official day of training at the company. A woman wearing glasses arrived at the entrance with a folder in her hands to welcome him. At that moment, Sang-hyun was standing in front of a mirror, admiring the beautiful face he could never get tired of looking at. When the woman suddenly greeted him, Sang-hyun was so absorbed in his reflection that he jumped in surprise. Her name was Yoon Ju-yeon, and she was the head of the company's trainee development team. Ju-yeon repeatedly complimented Sang-hyun's beauty and explained that he didn't need basic rookie training and could begin taking lessons immediately. The moment she opened the practice room door, Sang-hyun froze in place. The room was filled with noisy female trainees. Some were practicing, while others were sitting around and chatting. One girl dressed in red was leaning against the mirror and quietly muttering something to herself. She then told the trainee beside her that someone would definitely be eliminated during the monthly evaluation, which meant a newcomer would naturally be brought in to fill the empty position. Park So-ae was also inside the practice room. Even worse, she had already noticed Sang-hyun. Yoon Ju-yeon stepped into the room and told everyone to quiet down. She then formally introduced Sang-hyun as the newest trainee. Sang-hyun nervously glanced at So-ae, hoping that as long as she didn't recognize him, everything would be fine. Fortunately, Han Ok-yeon had already prepared a completely new identity for him, including a new name and an entirely fabricated personal profile. Forcing himself to remain calm, Sang-hyun greeted everyone. "My name is Han Yoi. It's nice to meet you all." At that moment, every trainee in the room turned to look at him. Some of them even declared that he was the most beautiful trainee in the entire company. At that moment, Yoon Ju-yeon suggested that Sang-hyun show everyone what he could do. Sang-hyun turned toward her with a completely confused expression. With so many people staring at him, he suddenly felt an enormous amount of pressure. However, Sang-hyun was extremely confident in his dancing. He had coached the school dance club and had also been one of the top students at his academy. This was the perfect chance to see whether Park So-ae could recognize him. Even though his appearance had changed, the person inside was still Kim Sang-hyun. He raised his arms and began moving to the beat. The trainees watching his performance couldn't help but praise him. But just then, Sang-hyun suddenly heard one of his joints make a sharp cracking sound. A tearing pain immediately shot through his ankle, causing him to lose his balance and crash face first onto the floor. Everyone in the room stared at him in shock. Sang-hyun pushed himself up from the floor and raised his head awkwardly, completely frozen in confusion. Cold sweat streamed down his cheeks as panic and disbelief covered his face. Even he couldn't believe that someone as skilled at dancing as him had fallen in front of everyone. But when he looked up at the other trainees, he realized that they were laughing at him. Just then, Yoon Ju-yeon hurried over and helped him back to his feet. Meanwhile, the other trainees whispered that his performance was a complete joke. To ease the awkward atmosphere, Ju-yeon smiled and announced, "All right, let's begin practice. Everyone do your best today." The trainees had completely packed schedules every day, with individual training in the morning and group practice in the afternoon. Sang-hyun stood in the corner warming up. Thinking about what had just happened, he felt completely humiliated. He convinced himself that he had only failed because he was nervous on his first day. With his actual skill level, there shouldn't have been any problems. Just then, a beautiful woman dressed in black walked directly toward him. She was Kim Ja-rin, one of the company's dance instructors. After hearing that Sang-hyun had trained at an academy for years, she asked him to demonstrate his skills. Sang-hyun moved his stiff arms and barely managed to perform a short routine. The moment Ja-rin saw his movements, she looked completely stunned. She lowered her head and checked his profile again, wondering whether the information on his resume had been written incorrectly. Just then, she called out to instructor Ho-jun, who happened to be passing by. She said, "This is the new trainee. Please take her to the corner and teach her some basic body control." In other words, Sang-hyun had to start all over again from the basics. After repeating the exercise for 10 straight minutes, he finally earned a 1-minute break. By then, Sang-hyun was drenched in sweat and gasping heavily for air. He had only trained for 10 minutes, yet he was already completely exhausted. Even Sang-hyun couldn't believe how weak his new body was. After changing bodies, everything truly felt strangely different. At lunchtime, Han Ok-yeon called Sang-hyun and asked how his morning training had gone. However, Sang-hyun hesitated on the phone and nervously asked to meet her in person. After arriving at Han Ok-yeon's office, he dejectedly explained everything that had happened that morning. Han Ok-yeon studied him and suggested 2 possible explanations. The first was that Sang-hyun still didn't know how to control his new body and had yet to find the correct way to use its strength. The second possibility was that he had never danced in his previous life and might have simply been a warrior. The moment he heard this, Sang-hyun stared at her in complete disbelief. Seeing how anxious he was, Han Ok-yeon quickly stepped forward and comforted him. This is only your first day. We can start looking for a solution from now on. You have a vocal lesson this afternoon, right? Go find out whether your singing ability has changed too. When Sang-hyun left the office, Han Ok-yeon stood by the door and smiled as she waved goodbye. But despite her cheerful expression, she felt as though her entire world was collapsing. A few days earlier, when Oh Baek-jun had called her into his office, the two of them had already discussed Sang-hyun's situation. No matter how they looked at it, the entire situation was ridiculous. Even so, the parent company had agreed to give him a chance, since having more options was never a bad thing. But this was the company's first girl group, so it absolutely had to succeed. If Sang-hyun caused any serious problems, they would have to remove him immediately. If his beauty was the only thing he had to offer, there was no way the company could keep him. With that thought, Han Ok-yeon walked away, silently hoping Sang-hyun wouldn't be eliminated almost immediately. When lunchtime arrived, Sang-hyun entered the noisy cafeteria alone. Dancing had always been the one skill he could rely on, but now it felt as though an entire lifetime of experience had vanished in an instant. Just yesterday, he had excitedly examined every part of his new body. Yet, he had completely forgotten to test the one thing that mattered most, its physical ability. Sang-hyun sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, feeling incredibly awkward. When he heard people quietly whispering about him, he hurriedly finished his meal and escaped from the cafeteria. Before long, it was time for the afternoon vocal lesson. While everyone was practicing, the vocal instructor suddenly stopped Sang-hyun and said that something about his voice sounded strange. She then asked him to sing the part again. As expected, from a major entertainment company, every trainee around him was extremely talented. Compared to them, Sang-hyun felt like a complete beginner. By evening, he decided to remain at the company and practice for a little longer. Any trainee who wanted to practice alone had to apply to Yoon Ju-yeon for permission to use a room. Sang-hyun quickly signed his name on the application form and ran toward the practice room as fast as he could. When he reached the door, he heard rhythmic music playing inside. After spending the entire day practicing basic movements, he was instantly itching to dance the moment he heard the beat. Inside the room, a beautiful woman dressed in purple was practicing intensely, her entire body covered in sweat. Sang-hyun politely greeted her, and she immediately asked, "Are you Han Yoi?" The girl then introduced herself. "We're the same age. I'm Jung Suryeon." Sang-hyun smiled and replied, "Suryeon, that's a beautiful name." The two of them soon began practicing together and matched each other surprisingly well. But after only a short time, Sang-hyun was already bent over in exhaustion and could barely straighten his back. Drenched in sweat, he collapsed onto the floor and wondered whether something was wrong with his body again. Even a little dancing caused intense pain, and he had no idea whether things would improve once he adjusted to it. Every newcomer spent their first week training as a probationary trainee. Sang-hyun could only wonder whether he would be eliminated before he even survived the first week. Jung Soo-yeon lowered her head and stared at Sang-hyun helplessly. She had already spent 5 years as a trainee and had watched countless newcomers arrive during that time. Many of them had been lucky enough to get accepted, simply because they were beautiful, only to run away the moment they realized how low their actual skill level was. Most of them had only joined to see what would happen, believing that becoming an idol looked glamorous and exciting. Soo Ryan clearly assumed that Sang-hyun had entered the company with the same half-hearted attitude. She leaned down and warned him, "If you're not planning to train seriously, you should leave as soon as possible." Hearing this left Sang-hyun completely stunned. He stared at Suryeon in confusion, unable to understand why she was treating him with such hostility. He quickly stood up, intending to demand an explanation, but Suryeon suddenly turned around and prepared to leave. Sang-hyun immediately became furious. He knew that his current performance looked ridiculous, but "I didn't come here just to mess around, and I've never looked down on the idol industry. I truly want to become an idol." Hearing this, Suryeon turned around and looked at him. She then marched directly toward Sang-hyun. Without warning, Suryeon grabbed his jacket and pulled it open, glaring down at his chest. The sudden action made Sang-hyun break into a cold sweat, and he quickly clutched his jacket closed. But Suryeon only looked at him with complete disdain. "If you're truly serious about this, why were you dancing without even wearing a sports bra?" Sang-hyun had never expected Suryeon to suddenly do something like that. After exhausting himself during the previous day's training, Sang-hyun slept like a rock the next morning. even after his alarm buzzed several times. When he finally dragged himself out of bed and looked at his phone, his mind was still completely disoriented. He sat on the bed for a while, trying to organize his thoughts. Once he was ready, Song Hae-yeon went downstairs for a run. Halfway through, he looked down and realized that wearing a sports bra really was far more comfortable than going without one. Since he had bought it in a hurry the night before, he had been worried that it might not fit properly. If he wanted to regain his former ability, he would have to work several times harder than the other trainees. His immediate priority was improving his stamina enough to endure the intense training. But after only 10 minutes of running, he was already drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Apparently, his previous life had truly hated exercise. Sang Hyun suddenly felt nauseous and nearly threw up. But fortunately, someone nearby quickly stepped forward to support him. Determined to survive the upcoming week of evaluation, he decided to work twice as hard and begin with basic exercises under the assistant instructor. Training beside him was Mana, a Thai trainee who had joined the company before him. Although they practiced together every day, the two of them hadn't exchanged a single word. Sang Hyun moved his stiff limbs in front of the mirror, unable to coordinate his body at all. He couldn't help wondering why he had to relearn every basic movement from the very beginning. Just then, he noticed Mana stopping to rest beside him. Sang Hyun hesitated, unsure whether he should greet her first. Just then, two girls approached Mana and asked, "Are you finished practicing? Let's go have lunch together." Mana immediately stood up with a smile to greet them. She then left with the two girls, chatting and laughing along the way. Only then did Sang Hyun realize that Mana simply had no interest in speaking to him. In the crowded cafeteria, Sang Hyun was the only person sitting alone at an empty table. Perhaps his new body had a smaller stomach because he felt full after eating very little. At least that allowed him to save some time. As Sang Hyun got up and walked forward, he suddenly spotted Park So-ae. So-ae stood nearby, staring directly at him. Sang Hyun immediately lowered his head and hurried past her. His heart was pounding with panic. One of the girls beside So-ae complained, "She completely ignored us. We even went out of our way to greet her on her first day." Sang Hyun remembered standing alone in a daze after the talent demonstration on his first day. At the time, So-ae and two other girls had approached him and introduced themselves. So-ae had even explained that she was 1 year younger than him and told him not to act so nervous around them. She then asked curiously, "We met when you visited the company before, right? I think you even called my name. Did we already know each other?" Sang Hyun could only smile awkwardly and explain, "The director mentioned you to me before. She said you were very beautiful, so when I saw you, I assumed you had to be the person she was talking about." Even after hearing his explanation, So-ae continued staring at him suspiciously. From that moment onward, Sang Hyun tried his best to avoid So-ae. Honestly, every encounter with her made him extremely uncomfortable. Day after day, he attended countless classes, including foreign language conversation lessons and vocal classes that made him afraid to even open his mouth. But the most difficult part was still the physical training. After completing the day's schedule, Sang Hyun would remain alone in the practice room and continue training until late at night. Once he returned home, he repeatedly watched dance videos from other female idols, studying movements better suited to his new body. He also frequently sent videos of his dancing to instructor Hojun, but since his probationary period wasn't over yet, he rarely received any feedback. Dancing had once been his greatest strength, but now his body couldn't keep up with him. He would also unconsciously fall back into his old habits during practice, making his movements look even more unnatural. The next day, Sang Hyun sat inside the study room, staring blankly ahead in exhaustion, when someone suddenly called his name. He turned around and saw Yoon Ju-yen reminding him to submit his assignment. Only then did Sang Hyun realize that he had completely forgotten to write his news reflection report. He walked through the hallway in despair. He had heard that missing the assignment would be recorded in his evaluation, meaning he might truly be thrown out before his probationary period even ended. Staying up every night to practice had left him half asleep during the day. Sang Hyun knew he needed to pull himself together and find a way to improve his stamina. He dragged his exhausted body into the restroom, barely able to walk straight. Sang Hyun planned to wash his face with cold water to wake himself up, but it seemed that someone else was already inside. Sang Hyun turned around and discovered that Oh Baek-jun was also inside. Oh Baek-jun suddenly shouted angrily, "This is the men's restroom." Only then did Sang Hyun realize his mistake and immediately turn around and run. Oh Baek-jun was left standing there in confusion, thankful that Sang Hyun had only run into him. He couldn't believe Sang Hyun was now mixing up the restrooms as well. Shortly afterward, Oh Baek-jun went to the practice room to find Sang Hyun. Sang Hyun jumped when he suddenly appeared, Oh Baekjun asked whether his probationary period was almost over, and warned that there was no way the company could offer him a formal contract while he looked so exhausted, especially now that he had developed dark circles under his eyes. He then asked, "How are you getting along with the other trainees? Have you made any close friends?" Sang-hyun could only stare blankly at him. Without saying a word, Oh Baekjun immediately understood. "It looks like they're excluding you. Joining a group of girls isn't easy. I'll ask Han Okon to teach you how to build relationships with them." Only now did Sang-hyun realize how awkward even using the restroom had become after turning into a woman. Just then, he suddenly heard someone outside whispering, "She doesn't even submit her assignments. That's seriously unacceptable." Just like Suryeon said, it feels like she joined the company without taking any of this seriously. I tried talking to her before, but she pretended not to see me. Does she think she can look down on everyone just because she's beautiful? I'm worried she'll ruin the team dynamic and stop everyone from working together. Aren't any of you concerned? Another girl laughed and said, "Still, that girl is pretty entertaining when she dances. She moves like a newborn foal. It looks completely wrong with that beautiful face of hers. So it's hilarious." Sang-hyun finally realized that they had been talking about him behind his back all along. Didn't they know someone else was inside the restroom? One of the girls continued, "I don't want to see her anyway. Judging by her performance, she'll probably be eliminated soon." Just then, a trainee named Hyojong stepped out of the restroom. The girls who had been gossiping immediately fell silent. All of them turned toward Hyojong at the same time. One of the girls, dressed in black, turned her head and said coldly, "If she's going to be thrown out eventually, she should take the hint and leave on her own." Sang-hen remained hidden inside the restroom, unable to gather the courage to step outside. He only came out carefully after confirming that all of them had left. From that day onward, Sang-hyun trained relentlessly inside the practice room every single day. Since they looked down on him that much, he absolutely refused to lose. He often continued practicing from sunrise until long after dark. By the end, he would be drenched in sweat and collapse onto his knees. Sang-hen could no longer tell whether he was improving. After all, this body had no dance experience, and that wasn't something he could change in only a few days. He staggered back to his feet. The company had even used that strange bath bomb to bring him in, so they must have seen some kind of potential in him. Besides, it was thanks to Han Okyeon that he had obtained this body with its extraordinary beauty. If he left the company now, he might never be allowed to use this body again. He would have to return to being Kim Sang-hyun and continue attending hopeless auditions as a man. Just then, the practice room door suddenly opened. Sang-hyun turned around in surprise because the company had already announced that the room would close early that day. The person explained, "I saw the lights were still on, so I came to check." Sang-hyun immediately panicked. "You're closing already? Then I won't be able to keep practicing." Even so, he quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, I'll leave right now." Sang-hyun hurried past Hyojong in a panic, but he staggered as he walked, feeling as though his body was no longer under his control. Noticing that something was wrong, Hyojong immediately called out to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't look well." Sang-hyun turned toward her, without realizing that blood was already streaming from his nose. In the next moment, he collapsed onto the floor with a thud, causing Hyojong to scream in shock. Sang-hyun had no idea how much time had passed before he finally opened his eyes. He then heard Han Okyeon asking, "How do you feel? Are you awake now?" Hyojong explained that Sang-hyun had suddenly started bleeding from his nose near the practice room entrance before collapsing. She had remained beside him the entire time and had even helped stop the bleeding. Han Okyeon was relieved that she had still been at the company. "You only joined recently, so stop pushing yourself so hard. Changing bodies must be exhausting. You should change back and get some proper rest. You still know almost nothing about this body. Aren't you afraid that something might seriously go wrong?" Han Ok-en then decided to request half a day off for him the following morning. But Sang-hyun immediately insisted that he couldn't miss training. He feared that once the probationary period ended, everything would be over, and he was convinced the company might throw him out the very next day. After all, neither his singing nor his dancing was currently good enough to impress anyone. Han Ok-eon stared at him in complete confusion. She explained that the company didn't immediately offer formal contracts to probationary trainees because it wanted to give them enough time to seriously consider the job. The schedule was extremely demanding, and newcomers spent their first few days doing nothing but basic training. But after enduring an entire week of pain and exhaustion, anyone who still wanted the position would truly understand its value. Songhyun's determination was clearly strong, but the company hadn't known whether he would last. His gender had changed, and nearly all of his former skills had disappeared. However, as long as he was willing to endure the hardship and didn't run away, the company intended to sign him. Of course, the training ahead would still put him through plenty of suffering. Songhyun asked in disbelief, "So you're not going to immediately throw me out just because I'm not performing well yet?" While driving, Han Ok-en told him that he had still only been granted additional time to adjust. For the sake of his future training, he needed to rest first. Leaning against the seat, Sunghyun asked, "Are we going to another hotel? Or are we heading to my house?" Han Ok-en suddenly slammed on the brakes and snapped, "We can't go to a hotel every time you need to change bodies. Money doesn't grow on trees." She then brought Sunghyun directly to her own home. The moment she opened the door, Sunghyun froze in surprise. Han Ok-en stood in the doorway and gave him a teasing smile. Time passed quickly, and before Sunghyun knew it, he had already spent a week at the company. His probationary period had ended, and he was now an officially contracted trainee receiving proper instruction. However, his movements remained stiff, and every practice session was still incredibly difficult. He was drenched in sweat within minutes, and although he barely managed to follow everyone until the end, his body eventually gave out. Sunghyun collapsed onto the floor, feeling as though he couldn't keep up with the other trainees at all. Making matters worse, someone beside him kept criticizing his movements, preventing him from concentrating. That person was Jung Soo-yeon, who had disliked him from the beginning. Still, Sanghyun knew that maintaining balance was the hardest part of dancing, and he hadn't fallen even once that day. This proved that he was finally improving, and all the desperate training he had done recently hadn't been wasted. Just then, Sunghyun noticed Hyojong. Everyone else had gathered into small groups, while she sat alone on the floor. Sunghyun decided to approach her first, greeting her and thanking her for helping him the previous day. He explained, "I suddenly passed out yesterday, so I can't remember everything clearly. But I heard that you stayed beside me the entire time." Hyojong asked with concern, "Are you feeling better now? I was worried when I didn't see you this morning. I also heard that you officially signed with the company." "That's wonderful. We'll be able to see each other every day now, so I look forward to training together." Sanghyun quickly replied, "I'm the one who should be saying that." A sudden wave of emotion washed over him. He had already spent an entire week at the company, yet this was the first time anyone had shown him genuine warmth. When the break ended, their next class was professional conduct. Hyojong asked, "Can I walk there with you? I'd also like to sit beside you during class." The instructor had already announced that one of the company's artists would personally teach them that day. The previously quiet classroom immediately filled with excited whispers as everyone tried to guess who the guest would be. Just then, Oh Baek-jun stepped onto the stage and announced, "It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm today's special instructor, Oh Baek-jun." The classroom, which had been noisy only moments earlier, instantly fell silent. Sanghyun thought the other trainees' reactions seemed surprisingly cold. At that moment, Hyojong revealed that she was 24 and asked how old he was. When Sanghyun told her that he was 4 years younger, Hyojong looked genuinely surprised. She then explained, "I used to be a member of a group called Summer Girls, but we were so unpopular that the group disbanded after only 1 year. So I returned to being a trainee." Sanghyun felt as though he had heard the group's name somewhere before. Since Hyojong had successfully debuted once, she clearly possessed real talent. But Hyojong hurriedly warned him, "Please don't search for us. It's really embarrassing. Technically we debuted, but the whole thing was still pretty humiliating. My skills are actually nothing special compared to the trainees here. The truly talented ones are over there." She pointed toward the front of the room. Those two have already been selected for the potential debut lineup. The final members haven't been confirmed yet, but they consistently rank first and second during the monthly evaluations. The company even provides them with additional private training. Meanwhile, Oh Baek-jun seriously addressed the class. "You're all still young, so you may feel that enduring this much pain is unreasonable. But idols survive through talent and perseverance, while their attitude determines how long they last. Since you chose to remain here, you must be prepared to endure everything that comes with it." But, while Oh Baek-jun was sincerely teaching the class, one trainee suddenly shouted, "President Oh, tell us the story of your first love." The entire classroom immediately erupted into noise again. By the end of the lesson, Oh Baek-jun looked completely exhausted and could only conclude that children these days were terrifying. Before long, it was time for dinner. Sanghyun sat beside Hyojong, who revealed that she had always eaten alone before this. Sanghyun found that strange. Hyojong seemed like a genuinely kind person, so why was she always alone? Could it be because there were no other trainees close to her age? As for the two potential debut members Hyojong had mentioned earlier, Sanghyun rarely saw them outside of group practice. He had only been at the company for 1 week and had no idea how long it would take to recover all of his former ability. By the time he finally did, would there still be a place for him in the debut lineup? Only a few hours earlier, Sanghyun had officially signed his trainee contract with the company. In front of Han Okyeon, Sanghyun promised Oh Baekjun that he would work as hard as possible. However, Han Okyeon explained that the final debut lineup wouldn't necessarily be decided by skill alone. Even so, his abilities still needed to rise above the average trainee level. Sanghyun's biggest question was how good he needed to become to reach that standard. Hyojong stared at him with a confused expression. Sanghyun then asked, Hyojong, besides the two potential debut members, can you tell me who else is considered one of the strongest trainees? Hyojong replied, then I'll explain it based on last month's evaluation results. First, the current top-ranked trainee in music is a girl named Ha-yeon. Apparently she became somewhat famous after competing in children's singing contests. However, she's still young and hasn't gone through her vocal change yet, so the company needs more time to evaluate her. The vocal instructor also praises Park So-ae quite often. She started studying music relatively late, but she has a naturally beautiful vocal tone. When it comes to singing, Yuri currently ranks first, while Min-ji holds second place in the dance division. I believe those two graduated from the same art school. Everyone I just mentioned has a particular field in which they excel, but the trainee with the strongest overall ability is probably Jung Suryeon. Hearing her name surprised Sanghyun. No wonder Suryeon had always spoken to him so harshly. Compared to those trainees, he was still far behind. Looking back, perhaps the others had understandable reasons for disliking him, but Hyojong comforted him. Don't put yourself down like that. You're incredibly beautiful. If you looked ordinary, they might not even pay attention to you. They dislike you because they feel threatened. As she spoke, Hyojong moved her chair slightly closer to Sanghyun. She then leaned toward his ear and whispered, You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen. You've probably heard that countless times already, but I still wanted to tell you myself. During a break the next day, Hyojong asked whether Sanghyun wanted to stay behind and practice. Sanghyun realized that since focusing on dance training, he had barely practiced singing. His concentration had recently improved, and his stamina was slowly getting better. So he decided to stay and train properly that day. But the moment he finished speaking, Sanghyun accidentally let out a big yawn. Hyojong immediately noticed how exhausted he looked. Sanghyun rubbed his shoulder and told her that he would probably feel fine after warming up. Warned him, don't push yourself so hard. You might collapse like you did yesterday. You should rest for a while. She then suddenly shifted from sitting on the floor to kneeling beside him. Sanghyun stared at her in confusion, but Hyojong patted her thighs and said, Lie down and sleep on my lap for a while. She reached out and pulled Sanghyun by the shoulder, making him feel incredibly awkward. Before he could react, Hyojong pulled him right down onto her lap. She reassured him, Don't worry, if you fall asleep, I'll wake you up later. But as Sanghyun lay on Hyojong's lap and looked up at her, he immediately broke into a cold sweat. Meanwhile, Han Okyeon drove into the company parking lot. Before she could even step out of the car, someone suddenly knocked on her window. She looked outside and saw an older middle-aged man standing there and waving at her. The moment Han Okyeon realized it was the company chairman, she quickly got out of the car. The man smiled and said, You've been incredibly busy lately. It's becoming difficult to even meet you. Has work been difficult since you joined the entertainment agency? When I first established the subsidiary, the person I worried about most was Baekjun. He has never been particularly decisive. I trained him for more than 10 years, so I understand his personality better than anyone. The middle-aged man speaking to her was Jung Gui-won, the chairman of the entertainment company. He instructed Han Okun to remain beside Oh Baekjun and support him properly. As soon as he finished speaking, Jung Gui-won moved closer to Han Okyeon and quietly warned her to be especially careful around Jun Se-woo and to make sure Oh Baekjun remained cautious. After leaving her with that warning, Jun Gui-won turned around and walked away. Once Han Okyeon returned to her office, she collapsed heavily into her chair. She then pulled out her phone and made a call with an exhausted expression. It turned out that she was contacting Yoon Ju-yeon from the trainee development team. Han Ok-an asked Ju-yeon to send over the customized training plans for that week. After opening the spreadsheet, she realized that the monthly evaluation was approaching. The company would also need to share the week's assessments with the producers and other production staff. When she reviewed Han Yoi's personal training plan, Han Ok-an decided that dance still needed to remain his main focus. She also added yoga classes to improve his flexibility. On the other end of the call, Yoon Ju-yeon noticed how exhausted Han Ok-yeon sounded and became slightly concerned. However, Han Ok-yeon was more focused on Yoi's recent progress. He had voluntarily stayed late the previous night to practice and had gradually begun learning the fundamentals of vocal training. Simply put, his greatest problem was that he hadn't fully adjusted to his new body. It was similar to hearing his recorded voice for the first time. Sang-han had spent the entire night repeatedly practicing so he could adapt to his current voice. Hyo-jong had also helped him tremendously. At this rate, perhaps his dancing would improve as well if he invested enough time into it. Just then, the vocal instructor approached Sang-hyun and called out, "You're next. Warm up your voice first. Once you're ready, sing the entire song from beginning to end." Standing beside the instructor, Sang-hyun focused completely and performed the entire song. After finishing, he nervously asked, "Was that okay, instructor?" She replied, "It sounded good. You've improved a lot since the first time, and your breathing and vocal projection were both well controlled. But did you sing it in the original key?" Sang-hyun explained, "I raised the key slightly higher than usual." "Was there a problem?" The instructor shook her head. "There's nothing major you need to fix. Congratulations, you passed." Sang-hyun immediately found Hyo-jung and shared the good news. She smiled and said, "While we were practicing yesterday, I could tell that you kept adjusting the way you sang. I'm sure the instructor noticed your effort too." The company also has 2 vocal instructors. One of them only handles the potential debut team and trainees whose singing skills are falling behind. It's a good thing you passed today. Otherwise, you would have been sent to that instructor for special training. Sang-hyun smiled and said, "Your singing is amazing too, Hyo-jung. I'd expect nothing less from someone who has already debuted. After class, I'm definitely searching for your old performances." Unexpectedly, Hyo-jung immediately became nervous. She clearly hated the idea of him searching for information about her former group. She quickly explained, "Our stage concept was terrible. Even if you watched it, you wouldn't learn anything useful." During the lunch break, Sang-hyun wandered up to the rooftop, alone. He stood there, repeatedly thinking about his performance that day. But when he raised his head, he noticed Han Ok-yeon standing on the rooftop as well. So he called out to her. Han Ok-yeon turned around and stared at him in surprise. She asked, "How did you find this place?" "This is supposed to be my secret spot," Sang-hyun hesitantly replied. "But isn't this just a normal rooftop?" Han Ok-yeon pointed toward the building across from them. "Do you see that building? Paparazzi used to set up cameras over there to catch celebrities doing something scandalous." Sang-hyun stared at her in disbelief. She continued, "Hardly anyone comes up here anymore. The only people who visit are trainees, hoping to pretend they accidentally ran into one of the company's artists." Sang-hyun quickly explained that he had only been looking for somewhere to exercise a little after lunch. Han Ok-yeon kept staring at the drink in his hand and asked, "What are you drinking?" Sang-hyun replied, "This? Hyo-jung bought it for me." Han Ok-yeon smiled. "It looks like the two of you have become friends." Sang-hyun could tell that she was genuinely happy for him. She then held out her hand and asked, "Can I have a sip? I'm suddenly thirsty." Sang-hyun handed her the drink without hesitation. But when he saw how quickly she was drinking, he began worrying that she might choke. Unfortunately, his prediction immediately came true. Han Ok-yeon choked on the drink and began coughing violently. Sang-hyun stared unhappily at his clothes, which were now covered in the water she had sprayed everywhere. Meanwhile, Han Ok-yeon simply covered her mouth and laughed, without showing the slightest hint of remorse. She even said, "This is the perfect chance to wash those clothes and change into something new. You wear that ugly tracksuit every single day." Sang-hyun stared at her in confusion, unable to imagine what she was planning this time. Han Ok-yeon continued, "Come somewhere with me this afternoon. Make sure you clear your schedule." With that, she smiled and walked away. That afternoon, Han Ok-yeon brought Sang-hyun to a shopping mall filled with every kind of clothing imaginable. She explained that many of the company's artists regularly came there to shop. She then asked, "What kind of style do you like?" Sang-hyun answered, "I usually like something simple, like a white shirt and jeans." Han Ok-yeon immediately led him into a fashionable clothing store. When she picked out an outfit and told him to try it on, Sang-hyun quickly protested. "I said I like seeing other people wear clothes like that. I never said I wanted to wear them myself." He frantically waved his hands and refused. But Han Ok-yeon reminded him that the entire purpose of the trip was to buy him new clothes. Besides, he didn't necessarily have to wear anything overly revealing or seductive. Sang-hyun examined the outfit and cautiously asked, "This is called an off-the-shoulder top, right?" Han Ok-yeon replied, "If that feels too intimidating at first, you can wear something with a square neckline that covers your shoulders, or a one-shoulder design." But when Sang-hyun saw the clothes she had selected, he still couldn't accept them. Even though he now looked like a woman, he simply couldn't imagine wearing something like that. The thought alone was humiliating. Han Ok-yeon ignored every complaint and held a spaghetti strap dress in front of him. Are you planning to wear a tracksuit when you perform on stage too? She then handed him a black, spaghetti strap dress and ordered him to try it on. The moment Sang-hyun saw it, all the color drained from his face. No matter how strongly he resisted, he was ultimately unable to win against Han Ok-yeon. She told him, "Beautiful clothes are meant to be seen. Don't tell me that wearing one dress is enough to make you confused about your identity. If you're really a man, then stop hesitating." Sang-hyun knew she was deliberately provoking him again, but with no other choice, he reluctantly entered the fitting room and changed. The moment he put it on, however, he realized that his bra straps were completely visible. Han Ok-yeon casually replied, "That's easy to fix. You just need a strapless bra. I'll take you to buy one while we're here." Sang-hyun seriously suspected that she had planned this from the beginning. Peeking through the gap in the door, he insisted that there was no need to buy one especially for him. After all, he already knew his size. Sang-hyun had never imagined that he would dress like this in his lifetime, and the breeze against his exposed skin felt incredibly strange. Once he stepped out, Han Ok-yeon grabbed his arm and said, "Walk naturally and stop shrinking into yourself. No one thinks you look strange." Sang-hyun had never cared much about shopping, but he had to admit that seeing a beautiful woman dressed in beautiful clothes was enough to make anyone's heart race. Han Ok-yeon then brought Sang-hyun to another clothing store, making him suspect that she was simply choosing outfits she personally wanted to wear. When Han Ok-yeon picked up a dress, Sang-hyun quickly said, "I think that one would suit you." But Han Ok-yeon immediately held the dress against his body instead. Sang-hyun disliked clothes that looked overly feminine, and for the first time, he realized just how exhausting shopping could be. By then, he was too tired to keep walking, and had collapsed onto a bench inside the mall. Before long, Han Ok-yeon returned carrying several shopping bags. "Sorry to keep you waiting. These clothes should be enough for a while." Before Sang-hyun could react, she placed all the bags directly on his lap. She then scolded him. "What kind of girl sits with her legs spread while wearing a skirt? Do you seriously lack even that much common sense? Get up. I'm taking you to look at cosmetics next. A face this beautiful needs proper care. So we might as well buy everything you need today." At that moment, Sang-hyun felt like a puppet being controlled however she pleased. An hour later, they had finally purchased everything. Han Ok-yeon looked completely satisfied, while Sang-hyun only wanted to go home. Just then, a credit card charge notification appeared on Han Ok-yeon's phone. Only then did Sang-hyun realize that she might have paid for everything herself. Han Ok-yeon answered as though it were obvious. "Who else would pay for it? Did you expect me to use company funds?" Sang-hyun hesitantly asked. "But you only bought all of this because of work, right?" After hearing her response, he quietly followed behind her. After walking for a while, Sang-hyun offered, "Director Han, we've been shopping for so long. Let me buy you a cup of coffee." Once they sat down, Han Ok-yeon asked, "Have you been worrying about anything lately? Maybe something related to your classes?" Sang-hyun certainly had several concerns, but he wasn't sure whether he should mention them. After hesitating, he finally asked, "You previously said that debut members aren't chosen strictly according to skill rankings. Does the company use some other special standard?" Han Ok-yeon replied, "I only said that to encourage you. Why are you suddenly asking?" Sang-hyun quietly explained, "I barely passed today's vocal lesson, but at my current level, I don't have any other standout skills." Han Ok-yeon immediately disagreed. "Who says you don't? Your face is your greatest strength. Appearance can be treated as a talent too. Have you never thought about how you should take advantage of this body?" But Sang-hyun felt that doing so would mean abandoning all the ability he had built in the past. Just then, Han Ok-yeon mentioned that the company was apparently preparing to debut a new boy group soon. Sang-hyun looked surprised. "Really? Their skills must be incredible too." Han Ok-yeon checked the time and said, "We should probably get going." Sang-hyun then carried the shopping bags and silently followed behind her. Just then, a young man in a blue jacket walked past Sang-hyun before suddenly calling out to him. The young man bent down and picked up a wallet that had fallen onto the floor. But the moment he lifted it, he casually opened it and took a look inside. The first thing he saw was an identification card belonging to a man. He immediately stared at Sang-hyun with a confused expression. Only then did Sang-hyun realize what had happened and quickly turn around to snatch the wallet back. But the young man asked, "Is this yours?" "The person on this ID is clearly a man." Sang-hyun was too embarrassed to answer. Fortunately, Han Ok-yeon hurried over at that exact moment. She quickly explained, We found that wallet on the street earlier. We were about to return to the place where we found it and see if anyone was looking for it. However, the young man still looked suspicious and clearly didn't believe her completely. Sang-hyun held out his hand. Just give it to me. I'll take care of it myself. But just as the young man extended the wallet, he suddenly pulled his hand back again. Sang-hyun could only repeat, then just hand it over. The young man then revealed that he knew the person shown on the ID. Sang-hyun continued insisting that he return the wallet, but Han Ok-yeon immediately sensed that something was wrong. She quickly stopped Sang-hyun and whispered, "Wait, don't say anything." Han Ok-yeon then turned toward the young man. "Have I seen you somewhere before? You're that rookie who recently debuted, right?" Sang-hyun stared at her curiously, having heard nothing about a new male artist debuting. A short while later, Sang-hyun followed Han Ok-yeon back to the office and demanded to know why she had stopped him. But Han Ok-yeon reacted even more strongly than he did. She rushed forward, grabbed his shoulders and shook him. "Are you sure you had nothing to do with the entertainment industry before this? Why do you know so many people?" Sang-hyun quickly explained that the young man's name was Cha Kong-won. The two of them had attended the same school, but they had never been particularly close. Still, Sang-hyun had to admit that Gong-won was extremely handsome. Even Han Ok-yeon praised the company for having an excellent eye for talent. But Sang-hyun immediately protested. His face is the only thing he has going for him. His singing and dancing are both terrible. That only made Sang-hyun even more curious about what secret Cha Gong-won had used to successfully debut. Just then, a message suddenly appeared on Sang-hyun's phone. "Speak of the devil." Cha Gong-won texted him and asked whether he had visited the mall that day. He also said that he had Sang-hyun's wallet and asked him to send over an address. The moment Sang-hyun heard that he needed to provide an address, he immediately panicked. He hurriedly asked Han Ok-yeon whether she could retrieve the wallet for him. But Han Ok-yeon explained that Gong-won had already seen her earlier. If she appeared again, the entire situation would only seem even more suspicious. She then handed Sang-hyun an access card and told him to hurry to her apartment and change back into his original body. She still had work to finish and couldn't accompany him. Besides, Sang-hyun had spent the entire day walking around in those clothes and had to be exhausted. Sang-hyun secretly rejoiced. Since he would change back soon anyway, it no longer mattered what he was wearing. He picked up his tracksuit and turned to leave. But just then, Han Ok-yeon suddenly asked, "You're not still attached to your original male body, are you? Do you know why I made you try on so many outfits today? Clothing doesn't only affect your image. It also changes the way other people see you. The discomfort you feel right now will only become stronger from now on." Sang-hyun turned around and looked at her. Han Ok-yeon smiled and continued, "If you can never let go of your old self, then changing in the first place will become meaningless." Sang-hyun more or less understood what she meant, and he suddenly remembered what had happened between them on the rooftop. Before leaving, he asked, "Did you actually just want to go shopping with me today?" He then walked away, leaving Han Ok-yeon sitting there with a completely bewildered expression. On the way back, Sang-hyun still couldn't understand what anyone saw in Cha Gong-won besides his handsome face. The guy possessed no other obvious talent or charm. He remembered the day Gong-won first arrived at their school and introduced himself as a trainee under 00 Entertainment. But no one in the class had ever heard of 00 Entertainment. Gong-won explained that a talent scout had approached him on the street and told him to learn singing and dancing before reporting to the agency. It turned out that he had originally been an ordinary student just like everyone else. Still, with his face and proportions, even a few casual dance moves would probably make him look incredibly impressive. But during a music lesson, Gong-won stammered his way through a song and was harshly scolded by the teacher. Before long, no one at school paid any attention to him anymore. One day, Gong-won approached Sang-hyun in the hallway and said, "You have a pretty good singing voice. I thought dancing was your only talent." Sang-hyun had only hummed a few lines and was surprised that Gong-won had even heard him. But Gong-won then asked, "Why do you keep croaking like a frog?" Sang-hyun angrily explained, "That's called a vocal hiccup. Have you seriously never listened to Michael Jackson?" But judging by Gong-won's expression, he seemed to be making fun of him. Sang-hyun then performed the moonwalk and asked, "You at least recognize this move, right?" But Gong-won responded like an idiot. "I didn't know you could dance while standing in place." Just then, someone behind them suddenly called Gong-won's name. Sang-hyun turned around and saw Park So-ae. She asked Gong-won to accompany her to the comic cafe on the first floor. Sang-hyun suspiciously asked whether the two of them were dating, causing So-ae's face to turn bright red. She explained that they had promised to try dating if they both succeeded in their auditions. After spending more time around Gong-won, Sang-hyun eventually summarized the boy with a single description: a painfully irritating simpleton. Before he realized it, Sang-hyun had arrived at Han Ok-yeon's apartment. After using the red bath bomb to return to his original body, he headed to the agreed location and waited for Cha Gong-won. Just then, Sang-hyun suddenly spotted Park So-ae. He stared at her in alarm. Classes weren't even over yet, so why was she already outside? So-ae briefly glanced at Sang-hyun before hurriedly turning around and leaving. Not long before this, Sang-hyun had arranged to meet Cha Gong-won and retrieve his wallet. After all, Gong-won was about to officially debut. If they didn't meet now, they might never get another chance. But when Sang-hyun mentioned that he had even skipped class for their meeting, Gong-won asked whether he still hadn't given up on becoming a trainee. Sang-hyun couldn't believe that after so long apart, Gong-won's first reaction was still to mock him. Even so, there was one thing Sang-hyun knew for certain. He had worked far harder than Gong-won and desired success far more desperately. Yet, the debut position Sang-hyun had always dreamed of had already been claimed by Gong-won. Unable to hold back, Sang-hyun asked, "Cha Gong-won, why do you think you were able to debut? Did your skills improve, or did you discover some other talent?" Gong-won admitted that he had improved slightly, but compared to the other members, his abilities were still terrible. Even now, he was constantly enduring insults he had never heard before in his life. He continued, "My debut had nothing to do with skill. If you want to say that my only talent is my face, I can't argue with you. I'm incredibly handsome after all." With that, Gong-won turned around and left. Hearing his response dealt a heavy blow to Sang-hyun. He decided to return home first, since the entire day had exhausted him in every possible way. Just then, the sound of a car horn suddenly came from behind him. Sang-hyun turned around and discovered Han Ok-yeon. She warned him, "You can't go home looking like that. If you keep wandering around here, people are going to misunderstand the situation." Only then did Sang-hyun remember that all the clothes they had bought were still inside her car. Han Ok-yeon told him to take them with him. Sang-hyun approached the window and accepted her access card before cautiously asking, "Can you drive me there? I still need to change my body back." But at that moment, the access card slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. Han Ok-yeon stared at him in complete disbelief. Sang-hyun asked, "What's wrong with you today? Weren't you the one who said hotel money doesn't grow on trees?" Han Ok-yeon explained that having him constantly enter and leave her home would be extremely inconvenient. It might have been different if they were the same gender, but she would only drive him there one final time. From then on, he would have to go by himself whenever he needed to change bodies. Before long, the car arrived outside Han Ok-yeon's apartment building. Sang-hyun sat inside the bathtub and stared down at the bathwater as it gradually turned pale blue. He had heard that the bath bomb's effects would eventually disappear after mixing with other liquids, but what truly troubled him was whether he should completely abandon his original body. Gong-won had already realized that he couldn't compete through singing and dancing like the other idols. He accepted that fact and chose to use his appearance to create his own male idol appeal. That approach was completely different from Sang-hyun's old desire to prove himself through skill alone, because his skills had once been the only thing he could rely on. After finishing the bath, the person reflected in the mirror was still a girl with terribly uncoordinated movements, no obvious talent, and an extraordinarily beautiful face. Staring at his reflection, Sang-hyun made a firm decision. "I'm Han Yoi now. I'll turn this version of myself into someone even more perfect. Starting today, I'll pursue my dream while living as a woman." Meanwhile, Cha Gong-won was asking around for information about Han Yoi. He had heard that an incredibly beautiful newcomer had recently joined the company, and everyone was already talking about her. If he had met her sooner, he would have given her his business card. No wonder her presence had seemed completely different from that of an ordinary person. Gong-won held the wallet he still hadn't returned, and repeatedly thought back to the day he first met Yoi. The following day, while everyone was practicing, Park So-ae suddenly entered the practice room. The moment their eyes met, Sang-hyun decided that he would no longer deliberately avoid her. During practice, he noticed that his movements had become far more agile than before. This reminded him of the cartwheel he used to practice. Could the yoga classes he had recently started taking finally be working? He had no idea whether he could still perform the move in a woman's body. But since it had been so long, he decided to try. Sang-hyun crouched down, firmly planted both hands on the floor, and focused his attention. He then shifted his center of gravity toward his upper body. But just as he was about to land, a sharp pain suddenly tore through his abdomen. He had been only one step away from a perfect landing when his stomach suddenly began hurting. Hyojong, who was standing nearby, quickly stepped forward and supported him. Jong Soo-ryeon coldly remarked, "Do you realize how dangerous that was? You're not the only person using this practice room." Sang-hyun turned towards Soo-ryeon, and the trainees gathered around her. After hearing her criticism, he immediately fired back. "I heard that outside of the potential debut team, you're the highest ranked dancer. So why do you stare at me every single time I practice? Is there something you want to say to me?" Soo-ryeon hesitantly replied that she only watched him because his movements looked funny. After practice ended, Sun-hyun went to the changing room with Hyojong. She commented on how chaotic the atmosphere had been and suggested that they check the newly released schedule together. Only then did Sang-hyun realize that the monthly evaluation was only 2 weeks away. The monthly evaluation was designed to show how much each trainee had improved over the previous month. Outside judges and senior company executives would attend and supervise the performances. Anyone who left a strong impression could be promoted directly into the potential debut team. However, trainees judged to have no remaining potential could also receive a termination notice. That month's evaluation included both individual and team categories, meaning every trainee had to prepare 2 performances. Just then, Han Ok-yeon, who was standing nearby, waved and greeted Sun-hyun. When the team assignments were announced, Hyojong was placed in Team C. To Sang-hyun's complete surprise, he was assigned to the same team as Park So-ae. Still, there was no reason to panic, because his current identity was Han Yo-lee. During lunch, Sang-hyun told Hyojong that he needed to visit the rooftop first. Meanwhile, Cha Dong-won wanted to create an opportunity to bump into Yo-lee. Even though he normally never ate in the cafeteria, he decided to go there that day. But on his way, he overheard someone saying that Yo-lee was currently alone on the rooftop. Gong-won immediately forgot about lunch and rushed toward the rooftop. Standing on the rooftop, Han Yo-lee couldn't help complaining that trainees weren't even allowed to use the company gym. But Sang-hyun needed to pull himself together for the upcoming team assignment. He couldn't afford to drag everyone else down. Just then, another uncontrollable pain twisted through his stomach. Could something really be wrong with his new body? Sang-hyun decided that he needed to leave the rooftop immediately. But the moment he turned around, he saw Cha Gong-won. Sang-hyun stared at him in surprise, unable to understand why Gong-won was there. Hadn't Han Ok-yeon said that hardly anyone ever visited the rooftop? When Gong-won began walking directly toward him, Sang-hyun quickly shouted, "Don't come any closer. Haven't you heard the rumor? There could be fans with cameras watching from the building across the street." But Gong-won immediately burst out laughing. "What exactly are you so worried about? This is only the company rooftop. That rumor is already 5 years old. Still, you have a point. It would be troublesome if someone misunderstood the situation. But I want to go over to where you're standing. If it makes you uncomfortable, why don't you come down first?" Sang-hyun stared at him in confusion, unable to understand what this idiot was planning. A short while earlier, Hyojong had noticed that Yo-ai had been on the rooftop for a long time, so she decided to look for her while bringing her some water. As she walked, Hyojong thought about how she was technically the oldest trainee in their group, yet her position was strangely awkward, and she barely had any presence. 3 years earlier, she had promoted as a member of a girl group, but throughout their entire year of activities, they had been forced to perform in swimsuits during every season. The ridiculous concept caused controversy online, and the group eventually disbanded. That experience made Hyojong admire Yo-lee even more. If she had possessed such a beautiful face, she might have chosen an easier path, but Yo-lee never seemed interested in using her appearance to obtain what she wanted. Meanwhile, Sang-hyun watched Gong-won continue approaching him on the rooftop. He quickly stepped down and snapped, "Use the rooftop however you want. I'll leave so I don't get in your way." But as Sang-hyun walked past him, Gong-won was shocked to discover blood staining the back of his pants. Cha Gong-won quickly called out to Sang-hyun while taking off his jacket to cover the blood stain on his pants. Just then, Hyojong finally arrived and called out Han Yo-ai's name. The moment she saw Gong-won holding out his jacket to cover Sang-hyun, she froze in shock. Assuming that Gong-won was trying to do something to him, Hyojong immediately stepped in front of Sang-hyun and warned, "Listen carefully. Male and female trainees are forbidden from speaking privately." Gong-won explained, "You've misunderstood. I'm not a trainee." Hearing this, Hyojong immediately lowered her head and apologized. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize who you were." Gong-won then looked at Sang-hyun and said, "So your name is Yo-lee. It sounds beautiful. Is that your real name?" Sang-hyun saw Hyojong standing protectively in front of him while staring at Gong-won in confusion. He quickly grabbed her hand and said, "Since you're already here, let's leave together." Without looking back, Sang-hyun pulled her away while Gong-won repeatedly shouted "wait" from behind them. Gomwon found the situation strange because Han Yoi seemed to genuinely dislike him. Hyojong struggled to keep up and said between breaths, "It looks like we deliberately ignored him. He might become one of our seniors someday." But Sang-hyun refused to look back and pulled Hyojong directly into the restroom. At that moment, he experienced a kind of unfamiliar fear he had never felt before. Fortunately, Hyojong remained beside him and helped him. Sang-hyun removed his jacket and tied it around his waist, hoping it would temporarily hide the stain. He repeatedly reassured himself that it didn't matter if Gongwon had seen it. Sang-hyun was currently living as a woman, so this was completely normal, and he needed to adjust as soon as possible. Just then, Hyojong gently tugged on his clothes. She reminded Sang-hyun that they had to gather in the classroom at 1 o'clock. When they arrived, the team members were discussing what kind of song they should perform. Sang-hyun suggested covering a boy group dance because it might help them stand out. But the others strongly opposed the idea, and even claimed that Sang-hyun was the biggest weakness on the entire team. In the end, everyone decided to choose the performance song through a vote. Just then, Instructor Hojun arrived and asked them to perform the song's main dance section for him. But while dancing, Sang-hyun felt increasingly uncomfortable. Minji, who was lying on the floor resting, suddenly asked, "Did you used to practice boy group dances a lot?" After the performance ended, Sang-hyun casually lifted his shirt and wiped the sweat from his face. Hyojong immediately reached over and pulled his shirt back down. She nervously warned him, "What are you doing? Instructor Hojun is still standing right in front of us." Sang-hyun felt that girl group choreography was completely different from the street-style hip-hop he used to perform. He had rarely practiced this kind of dance before, and the cute, flirtatious gestures felt incredibly embarrassing. Just then, Instructor Hojun suddenly lowered the folder in his hands. He looked at the trainees and said, "Perhaps you wouldn't think that way if you saw someone perform it properly." He then demonstrated the choreography in front of everyone, leaving every trainee in the room completely stunned. Some of them exclaimed that they hadn't seen Instructor Hojun dance in years. It turned out that he had mastered girl group choreography long ago, and everyone praised him. "Instructor, that was amazing." Sang-hyun had never disliked girl group dances or considered them embarrassing. But no matter how hard he tried to imitate them, he couldn't express the unique elegance of a woman. To find a lighter and more graceful idol style, he had even searched through performances by older generation idols. As far as Sang-hyun remembered, many girl groups had once used this kind of concept. Just then, Sang-hyun suddenly remembered the former girl group Hyojong had mentioned. He immediately opened his computer and searched for it online. But the group didn't appear anywhere in the search results, perhaps because their activities had lasted for such a short time. The following day, all the team members gathered again and began rehearsing their performances for the monthly evaluation. Hyojong noticed how exhausted Sang-hyun looked and asked with concern, "Are you still feeling unwell today?" Whenever Sang-hyun remembered waking up in the middle of the night to wash his blanket and underwear, his mood immediately became terrible. Minji even told him to be grateful that she had saved that position for him. She warned that the spot would be visible from every angle, so even the smallest mistake would immediately stand out. Meanwhile, Team B also began assigning roles for its performance. Everyone was rehearsing under intense pressure, while Team A had especially little time to prepare its individual stages. However, Kim Hwa-yeon from Team A could handle many different performance styles. She suggested that everyone create a different signature pose at the end of each chorus. Unfortunately, Hyojong happened to overhear every word. She immediately shared the idea with Yoi and suggested that every member of their team create a signature pose as well. But the others worried that their performance would look too similar to Team A's. They preferred to focus on the choreography and perhaps add a little more charm to their facial expressions. Sang-hyun sat alone on a bench, paying no attention to their discussion. Hyojong approached and asked whether he was feeling embarrassed. After all, forcing himself to do something he had never done before was bound to feel awkward. Besides, Yoi wasn't normally someone who smiled very often. Sang-hyun raised his head and told her, "Smiling has never suited me. Someone once said my smile looked depressing and told me not to grin so widely." But as he continued speaking, he accidentally began describing things that had happened when he was still living as a man, leaving Hyojong completely stunned. When Sang-hyun saw the shocked expressions on both Hyojong and Park So-ae's faces, he finally realized his mistake and hurriedly claimed that he had actually been talking about his older brother. Just then, Minji walked over. She decided to demonstrate the difference between an amateur and a professional idol through her own actions. But as Sang-hyun watched Minji pose like a clown, he felt embarrassed on her behalf. Minji didn't care at all and insisted that those kinds of poses only worked for people who were naturally cute. Sang-hen realized that he couldn't even perform the most basic facial expressions expected from an idol. When he saw the countless expressions the other trainees could create so easily, he couldn't understand why everything became so difficult whenever he tried. While walking through the hallway, Sang-hyun happened to bump into Oh Baekjun, so he quickly copied Minji and struck a cute pose in front of him. Before Baekjun could even react, Sang-hyun turned around and fled. Oh Baekjun was left standing there in confusion, wondering whether Yoi had been practicing facial expressions. To help Sang-hyun improve more quickly, Oh Baekjun summoned him to the CEO's office. Once Sang-hyun arrived, Baekjun explained that he wanted to show him someone who could serve as a useful reference. He then raised a postcard and handed it to Sang-hyun. The girl pictured on it was Yoon Ro-ha, one of the 9 final winners of a global survival audition. Sang-hyun carefully studied the postcard in his hands, but couldn't understand why Oh Baekjun had suddenly shown him this girl. On the way back, Sang-hyun kept thinking about the name Yoon Ro-ha. He felt as though he had heard it somewhere before, and the face in the photograph also looked strangely familiar. He casually glanced behind him and noticed a poster of Ro-ha hanging on the wall. It seemed to have been there for a long time. She had once trained under Parang Entertainment before later appearing on a survival audition program. Hyojong, who was walking behind him, explained that Ro-ha had been the most influential contestant on the show. Although she ultimately placed 3rd overall, her popularity had been overwhelming. Hyojong added that Ro-ha was incredibly talented and mentally strong, then suggested that Sang-hyun search for some of her old performance videos. During the break, Sang-hyun went to a pavilion alone and began looking through information about Yoon Ro-ha. Based on her early appearances, she seemed completely out of place beside the other contestants. Her expressions looked unnatural, and her voice sounded stiff whenever she spoke. She seemed nothing like the incredible performer everyone had described. Could she become a completely different person once she stepped onto the stage? After all, wasn't a true superstar supposed to drive both fans and haters wild? But the moment Sang-hyun played one of her stage performances, it completely contradicted those first impressions. She was incredible, and it had been a long time since a female idol's performance had genuinely amazed him. The global survival audition had ended 2 months earlier, and Ro-ha was now preparing to begin her solo activities. Sitting inside the pavilion, Sang-hyun continued watching clips from her time on the show. One judge explained that Ro-ha had caught his attention from the beginning. Every other contestant smiled brightly while desperately searching for the camera, while Ro-ha sat alone and barely moved at all. But the moment she stepped onto the stage, she seemed to become an entirely different person. The confidence she displayed through her facial expressions was already at the level of a professional idol. The judges also gave her performance extremely high praise and asked whether she rarely smiled in her everyday life. They then explained that her final chance to debut would be determined by the public vote. In the end, Ro-ha ranked 1st in the public vote and successfully secured a place in the debut lineup. Sang-hyun couldn't understand it. Her real personality was so reserved, yet the moment the music started, everything about her completely changed. After watching her videos, Sang-hyun finally realized that acting was what he lacked even more than singing or dancing. Even while wearing clothes that didn't match his real personality, he needed to convince the audience that the person they saw was the genuine Han Yoi. However, he had never received any acting lessons at the company. This performance also required a different style, and simply copying someone else would never work. But who could he ask for help with something like this? As Sang-hyun stared at the flawless Yoon Ro-ha on the postcard, he began wondering whether he had chosen the wrong training method from the beginning. Just then, a girl named Kelly suddenly stepped in front of him. The moment Kelly noticed the Yoon Ro-ha postcard in Sang-hyun's hand, her expression became extremely animated. She excitedly said, "Our Ro-ha works incredibly hard, and she's an idol who truly loves her career. She has become so popular that she's constantly busy, and we can barely see her anymore." Kelly moved closer and explained that Ro-ha had once nearly entered the company's potential debut team. Since she had finally met someone else who liked the same idol, she decided to give Sang-hyun some extra merchandise. She then pulled numerous postcards featuring Yoon Ro-ha out of her pocket. Sang-hyun stared at her in confusion, unable to believe how obsessed she became when it came to her favorite idol. Later that night, Sang-hyun lay helplessly across his bed. His stomach had hurt on the first day, and now that it was already the 3rd day, his lower back had begun aching as well. After searching online, he learned that a period normally lasted between 4 and 8 days. He had already spent every day practicing facial expressions until his face nearly cramped. Surely he wouldn't fall asleep and stain the blanket again that night. Before going to bed, he needed to find a large overnight pad as quickly as possible. Just then, a small box suddenly fell out of his bag. Sang-hyun turned around and discovered that it was the previous life medicine Han Ok-on had given him. Sang-hyun stared at the previous life medicine that had rolled onto the floor. Did he really need to endure all this unnecessary pain? Since he was already at home, he could simply change back into his original body. Besides, there shouldn't be any problem with returning to his male appearance as long as he stayed inside. Normally, Sang-hyun would never change back so casually, but this time, he could no longer endure the pain caused by his period. The next morning, Sang-hyun picked up the box and discovered that it was completely empty. He froze in shock. Han Ok-on had given him 3 sets of the previous life medicine, but he had never checked how many remained. He had used the final dose the previous night. Even though he still had to attend classes at the company that day, Sang-hyun immediately called Han Ok-on and told her that something terrible had happened. But Han Ok-on said she had always known this situation would happen eventually. She simply hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Sang-hyun rushed to her office, only to discover that she wasn't there. When he called, Han Ok-on explained that she had to attend a meeting and couldn't help him yet, so she told him to wait in the CEO's office. But just as Sang-hyun was about to leave the room, he suddenly wondered what would happen if he encountered Park So-ae or Cha Gong-won inside the company. He quickly pulled a face mask out of his bag and put it on. He also wore a black cap. As long as he covered his face properly, no one should recognize him. Sang-hyun then arrived downstairs at the company. Following Han Ok-on's instructions, he avoided the main entrance and used the employee entrance instead, since she had already informed the staff. When Sang-hyun reached the elevator, he noticed that the doors were about to close. He immediately ran toward it and vaguely saw a beautiful woman standing inside. But before he could reach the elevator, the doors closed completely. Sang-hyun felt annoyed. Had the woman inside seriously not noticed him running toward the elevator? With no other choice, he had to take the stairs. After reaching the CEO's office, Sang-hyun found the face mask unbearably stuffy and quickly removed it. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the sofa, wondering when Han Ok-on would finally arrive. Just then, he suddenly heard footsteps outside. Sang-hyun quickly lifted the brim of his cap and saw a woman entering the room. He immediately became nervous. Why was someone else coming in? And what would happen if she discovered his identity? When Sang-hyun looked up carefully, he realized that she seemed to be the same beautiful woman from the elevator. She sat down beside him without saying a single word. Sang-hyun secretly glanced at her from the side and was shocked to discover that the woman was Yoon Roha. The silence in the room was painfully awkward, and Sang-hyun was already growing restless. He couldn't understand why Roha had come to the CEO's office, or why she had chosen to sit directly beside him. Only then did Sang-hyun remember that he should send Han Ok-on a message and tell her he was already waiting there. But as he searched through his bag for his phone, all the postcards inside suddenly spilled onto the floor. Sang-hyun froze when he saw the floor covered with postcards featuring Yoon Roha. If she saw him carrying so many pictures of her, would she assume he was some kind of obsessive stalker? Before Sang-hyun could pick them up, Roha suddenly stood directly in front of him, making cold sweat break out across his body. She then snatched the bag from his hands. Sang-hyun immediately felt as though he was about to face the second greatest crisis of his life. He hurriedly explained, "Someone I know told me to wait for her here." But Roha took out his identification card and examined it repeatedly. "You don't look like a trainee or an employee. You can just admit you're a fan. There's no need to lie." With that, she turned around and shoved the bag back into Sang-hyun's hands. Roha continued, "The ones before you never even dared to show their faces. They only used underhanded methods to approach me. Now someone has suddenly appeared right in front of me. This is extremely suspicious. Doesn't anyone here handle security?" Yoon Roha sat back down on the sofa and rested her chin on her hand. Thinking for a moment, she explained that those people had been using underhanded methods to harass her without technically breaking the law. Since they had never approached her face to face, the company couldn't identify them as easily as she had investigated Sang-hyun, making them extremely difficult to punish. The company had initially assigned bodyguards to protect her, but in the end, they had only been there for appearances. When Roha mentioned certain private details during the live stream, the company even criticized her, claiming that she might damage her public image. She had never expected the company to solve the problem for her in the first place. Hearing this, Sung-hyun realized that major entertainment companies operated very differently from what he had imagined. Still, he couldn't understand why Roha was sharing all of this with someone she had only just met. Just then, Sang-hyun remembered what Oh Baek-jun had previously told him. He quietly moved closer to Roha and shared his idea with her. But Roha replied, "You're carrying so many photocards of me while refusing to admit you're a fan. I still have every reason to suspect you." With no other choice, Sang-hyun decided that he needed to earn her cooperation. He promised to help her catch the people who had been secretly harassing her. But when he asked Roha to help coach a particular trainee, she instantly froze. Roha stared at Sang-hyun in disbelief, clearly not expecting him to make such a request. Just then, Han Oken arrived at the CEO's office. Sang-hyun and Roha both turned toward the entrance at the same time. The moment Han Okyeon saw the two of them alone together, she froze in surprise. Roha quickly approached her and explained, "This person said he was one of my fans, so we were talking for a while." She then turned back towards Sang-hyun and said, "I'll contact you later." At that moment, Jun Gui-won approached Sang-hyun and smiled. "Roha normally avoids her fans completely. I wonder what got into her today. She must be in a good mood. You're a lucky young man." Han Okyeon finally came to her senses and introduced the man standing before Sang-hyun. She explained that he was Jun Gui-won, the chairman of the entertainment company, and that he already knew everything about the previous life medicine and Sang-hyun's situation. Sang-hyun studied him carefully and realized that Jun Gui-won looked slightly older than he had imagined. But Gui-won suddenly asked, "Young man, why are you so short?" leaving Sang-hyun deeply embarrassed. Judging by his appearance, Sang-hyun really did seem shorter than the average man, although his body was still surprisingly muscular. After Jun Gui-won left, Han Okyeon quickly asked whether the chairman had frightened him, but Sang-hyun had no time to think about anything else. His only concern was returning to his female body. He had been so busy lately that he had never carefully tracked how much previous life medicine remained. Han Okyeon asked, "You must have a serious reason for wanting to change back into a woman so urgently." Sang-hyun then explained everything that had happened from beginning to end. After hearing the story, Han Oken brought him to a traditional medicine shop. The moment they entered, the sharp smell of herbal medicine filled the air. Sang-hyun had heard that Han Okyeon's family owned a pharmacy, so he wondered whether this was their shop. Just then, a young boy suddenly popped up in front of them. The moment Sang-hyun heard the boy call Han Okyeon "Mom," he froze in complete shock. Han Okyeon immediately tapped the boy on the head and scolded him. "Why do you say that every time I bring a male guest here?" She then turned towards Sang-hyun and explained that the boy was actually her cousin's son. Han Okyeon had also asked him in advance to prepare something and store it inside the refrigerator. She told Sang-hyun to sit down and rest while she went to retrieve it. Once Han Okyeon left, the mischievous boy sat beside Sang-hyun and asked, "Mister, are you Miss Okyeon's boyfriend?" The question made Sang-hyun even more embarrassed, and he hurriedly explained that they weren't in that kind of relationship. The boy then asked whether Sang-hyun was bored, sitting there alone. Before Sang-hyun could answer, the young boy handed him a book. "You can read this fairy tale if you're bored." Sang-hyun glanced at the book and explained that the story inside was also considered a famous legend among people in their line of work. The book mainly told the legend of Mount Muong. According to the story, anyone carrying a male presence was forbidden from entering the forest behind the sacred tree, or the mountain god would become enraged. Even the men from the tribe that had protected the mountain for generations were not exempt, so they consumed the reincarnation herb to temporarily become women. The reincarnation herb was a plant found only on Mount Muong. It drew out the ideal body engraved within a person's soul and restored their appearance from a previous life. By using it, the tribesmen could deceive the mountain god and continue living in the forest. The men supposedly left the mountain and returned to their original bodies only when it was time to produce descendants. Sang-hyun glanced toward Han Okyeon and saw her still working among countless bottles and containers. The book also claimed that most spiritual herbs became ordinary weeds after losing their power, but the reincarnation herb was different. Sang-hyun handed the book back to the boy and complained, "How is this a fairy tale? It's clearly a novel about witchcraft and superstition. Children shouldn't keep reading things like this. Even I don't know whether to believe this stuff anymore." Just then, Han Okyeon walked over. She mysteriously pulled a small bottle from behind her back and asked, "Can you guess what's inside?" Han Okyeon explained that the blue liquid was a type of perfume. Sang-hyun immediately wondered whether it was actually a new form of the previous life medicine. Before he could prepare himself, Han Okyeon sprayed it directly onto him. and told him to test the effect. Sang-hyun didn't even have time to react before his body instantly transformed back into Han Yoi. The young boy standing nearby was so shocked that he couldn't say a single word. Han Okion exclaimed, "It finally worked. I turned it into a perfume. A single spray changes your appearance, and there are no location restrictions or baths required. It's much more convenient." But Sang-hyun questioned her. "Why didn't you give me something this convenient sooner?" Han Ok-aeon explained that it was her secret weapon and that the formula had only recently been completed. More importantly, the new medicine also had side effects. Unlike the bath bomb, the perfume only lasted for 24 hours. Once the medicine wore off, the user would automatically return to their original body. Sang-hyun smiled as he accepted the bottle, believing he could maintain Yoi's appearance simply by spraying it again before the effect expired. But Han Ok-aeon suddenly leaned closer and warned him, "There's actually another side effect. I still recommend using the bath bomb whenever possible. Only use this when you have no other choice." Sang-hyun was left speechless. Was she seriously expecting him to discover the other side effect himself? Could it cause his body to transform only halfway? Just then, the young boy shouted, "Hello miss, I'm Jeon Youngnam, a third grader at Ingok Elementary School." Sang-hyun stared at him in disbelief. Had the boy already forgotten that he had been a man only moments earlier? On the way back to the company, Han Ok-aeon asked what had happened inside the CEO's office. Sang-hyun then explained his entire conversation with Yoon Ro-ha from beginning to end. He also revealed that Ro-ha had told him her real name was Lee Young-won. As for what Young-won had been thinking when she accepted Sang-hyun's proposal, Sang-hyun couldn't have guessed even in his wildest dreams. Just moments earlier, Sang-hyun had given Han Ok-aeon a general explanation of what happened during his conversation with Yoon Ro-ha. Han Ok-aeon stared at him in surprise. "I can't believe you actually recommended yourself. I'm even more shocked that Yoon Ro-ha agreed to help you." Just then, Sang-hyun remembered Ro-ha warning him not to reveal her private situation to anyone at the company, especially Han Ok-aeon. He cautiously asked, "Director Han, what do you think of Yoon Ro-ha?" Han Ok-aeon replied, "Putting personal opinions aside, her talent and influence can't be underestimated. You should learn as much as you can from her." Sang-hyun therefore concealed the real reason behind their agreement. He didn't tell Han Ok-aeon that his only current problem was finding a way to catch the people who had been harassing Ro-ha. Ro-ha had told him that they sometimes placed strange objects inside her car or repeatedly rang the doorbell at her home. Unfortunately, the security footage couldn't clearly capture their faces. Sang-hyun had never imagined that the harassers had already come so close to her private life. When he asked Ro-ha whether she had noticed anyone suspicious around her, she simply replied that she never paid attention to the people nearby. Only then did Sang-hyun realize that he knew almost nothing about Yoon Ro-ha. Just then, Kelly approached him and curiously asked what was going on. Sang-hyun explained that he wanted to learn some private information about Ro-ha. The moment he finished speaking, Kelly tilted her head and examined him curiously. "Yesterday, you said you had only just met her. How did you already fall for her charm?" Sang-hyun explained that Ro-ha seemed extremely anxious about something, while he now felt like a student who had been assigned homework that absolutely had to be completed. Just then, Hyo-jung also walked over. Kelly turned toward her and asked whether she remembered what Jong-soo-ryeon used to be like. "Weren't the two of you close before?" Hyo-jung replied, "We were never especially close. She simply took good care of me when I first began training." Kelly continued, "You know, she was never like this before. Her personality, tone of voice, expressions, and gestures have all changed. She might be able to fool everyone else, but she can't fool me. During last month's evaluation, we were assigned to the same team. That was when I realized she had been copying other people. If you don't believe me, I'll arrange a simple test for Yoon Ro-ha. The truth will reveal itself." Kelly then looked at Sang-hyun meaningfully. "Still, she managed to captivate you almost instantly. I suppose that's Yoon Ro-ha's charm." Hearing this left Sang-hyun completely speechless. During rehearsal the next day, Min-ji seriously warned Sang-hyun that his facial expressions could determine whether their evaluation ended in success or elimination. Sang-hyun awkwardly struck a pose and asked, "Do you really think this one is bad?" Min-ji sighed. "I clearly told you to create a cute signature pose, but all you did was poke your cheek. You should reconsider it before the actual performance." After hearing that, Sang-hyun turned away in disappointment. He had spent a long time trying to come up with that move, but Min-ji suddenly called him back. When Sang-hyun turned around, she placed both hands beneath her chin and said, "This is my signature pose. Isn't it cute? Sunghyun stared at her blankly, thinking that it hardly looked any different from his own. As the monthly evaluation drew closer, the company decided to keep the practice rooms open until 3 in the morning. After suffering through his period for 4 straight days, Sunghyun finally felt much better today. Even so, he still hadn't completely adjusted and constantly felt uncomfortable in his own body. Jung Soo-ryeon noticed him standing there in a daze and coldly asked, "Don't you want to practice with me? Should I leave?" Sang-hyun lowered his head and sighed, deciding to ignore her. As long as she didn't deliberately cause trouble like she had on his first day, he could tolerate her. Although Soo-ryeon had treated him harshly before, no one could honestly claim that his performance back then had been good. After all, he had been forced to perform without any preparation. Only recently had Sunghyun realized that Soo-ryeon and Cha Bong-won were surprisingly similar. He never expected that the person staying behind to practice with him until dawn would be Soo-yeon. Just then, music suddenly began playing inside the practice room. The song sounded extremely familiar. It was Black Laurel, Yoon Roha's first band track. Was Soo-ryeon planning to perform this relatively unknown song for her individual monthly evaluation? As Sang-hyun watched more carefully, he noticed that her movements also looked remarkably similar to Roha's. Could Kelly have been right that Soo-ryeon had been copying other people all along? But Sang-hyun decided to ignore that for now. He needed to focus on practicing his own performance. He rose onto his toes in front of the mirror and prepared to move with the rhythm. Sang-hyun reached forward and swung his limbs to the beat, placing every movement precisely on the strongest part of the rhythm. Soo-ryeon watched Han Yoi dancing beside her, and suddenly remembered the first time she had seen him perform. When the music ended, Sang-hyun stopped cleanly in his final position. He immediately felt confused, because dancing had somehow felt different that day. He also remembered experiencing that same familiar sensation before. If it wasn't his imagination, could this body finally be recovering his old dancing ability? Just then, Soo-ryeon asked, "Were you with Director Han during lunch today?" Sang-hyun looked at her curiously, unable to understand why she had suddenly asked about that. Soo-ryeon continued, "You two seem unusually close. An ordinary trainee has no reason to spend that much time with a director." Sang-hyun found her interrogating tone extremely irritating. He was tired of how arrogantly she always behaved. But just then, the practice room door suddenly opened, and a beautiful woman wearing a pink coat stepped inside. She looked around and asked, "Which one of you is Han Yoi?" The moment Sang-hyun realized it was Yoon Roha, he immediately became flustered. He could only stammer out a response. Roha stood by the doorway, brushed back her hair, and calmly said, "I came to fulfill our agreement." Sang-hyun immediately followed her out of the practice room, leaving Soo-ryeon behind with a confused expression. As he left, Sang-hyun noticed Soo-yeon glaring daggers at him. The rumors that he had entered the company through personal connections would probably become even stronger now. Still, he had never expected Roha to visit him so suddenly. She explained that she had been busy during the day, and that being seen together like this could create unnecessary trouble. From then on, she would visit him after midnight whenever they needed to meet. Sang-hyun didn't mind at all. As long as Roha was willing to teach him, he was grateful no matter what time she came. Roha then led Sang-hyun into another room. Judging by the interior, it didn't seem like a practice room normally used by the company's artists. Roha stood in the center and explained that she had rented the room privately, before asking, "What exactly do you want me to teach you?" Yoon Roha first asked Sang-hyun to perform the group song his team had prepared. Sang-hyun began moving to the rhythm and performed the choreography. But in the middle of the routine, Roha suddenly told him to stop. Sang-hyun sat down on the floor and rested for a moment. Roha then asked, "How long have you been dancing?" After thinking about it, Sang-hyun answered that it had only been a little over a month. Roha responded, "That's not bad. Judging only by the choreography, you already look fairly experienced. Did you receive professional training before this?" Sang-hyun could only give her an awkward smile. But Roha quickly added, "There's something strange about the way you dance. It feels like you're constantly calculating every movement in your head. You clearly know what comes next, but I can still see you hesitating at certain moments. I can practically hear you thinking that you should add more power here, but the real focus of this section is the hand gesture." Sang-hyun scratched his head awkwardly and explained that cute or seductive movements simply didn't suit him. Roha replied, "You and I actually have similar personalities. Who someone is on stage can be completely different from who they are off stage. Unless you literally have a switch that changes your personality. That's not an excuse." She then suddenly stepped closer to Sang-hyun. Standing directly in front of him, Roha created an intense sense of pressure. Both you and that man named Kim Song-hyun seem to have misunderstood something. I've always been sincere about the stage. I've never used the excuse that something didn't suit me to avoid doing it. Why can I do it when you can't? Perhaps you're not as sincere as you claim. Sang-hyun immediately protested. I may hate acting cute, but I'm willing to endure it if that's what becoming an idol requires. Roha calmly replied. If that's the level of determination you brought here, I can still teach you. But will simply enduring it truly satisfy you? If that's all you want, there was no reason to call me here. Sang-hyun stared at her in confusion. He had come for acting lessons, yet somehow it felt like he was receiving a lecture about his entire mindset. Hearing this, Sang-hyun hurriedly stood up and explained, I truly want this. If I weren't serious, I never would have asked you for help. Only I know that I was willing to become a woman just to pursue my dream of becoming an idol. I came to you because I heard there was someone very similar to me. Roha replied, you have such a beautiful face, yet you constantly claim that things don't suit you. She suddenly reached out and pinched Sang-hyun's cheek. Roha straightened his head and forced him to face the mirror. Do you look at yourself in the mirror often? Sang-hyun stared at her in surprise. Don't I see myself every time I practice dancing? Roha then asked, do you normally do your own makeup? Sang-hyun answered that he only knew the basics. But Roha continued staring closely at his face. She finally said, you don't look like someone who is obsessed with her own beauty. More accurately, you still haven't grown accustomed to your current face. Sang-hyun looked at himself in the mirror. Whether he was practicing expressions or simply studying his reflection, he always felt awkward. He still believed that acting cute didn't suit him. Roha turned away and announced, that's enough for today. Sang-hyun stood there in confusion. But you haven't taught me anything about acting yet. Roha replied, because you're not ready to learn acting. She then tossed a square object toward him. It turned out to be a hand mirror. Roha said, before studying anyone else, you need to understand yourself clearly. Would you like me to demonstrate? Before Sang-hyun could react, Roha struck an incredibly cute pose in front of him. As she naturally shifted through a series of gestures and expressions, Sang-hyun could hardly believe his eyes. Roha asked, did that look like acting to you? A beautiful girl should know how to display her beauty. Use what I just showed you as the standard and bring back 100 selfies. Sang-hyun stared at her in disbelief. You seriously want that many? Roha handed him her phone and told him to enter his contact information. Then send her the photos once he finished taking them. Sang-hyun nervously accepted the phone and quickly made an excuse. I can't give you my number right now. Could I send the photos to Kim Sang-hyun and have him forward them to you? Roha immediately stared at him suspiciously and asked, what exactly is your relationship with Kim Sang-hyun? Sang-hyun froze, wondering what kind of relationship he could possibly have with himself. Did that question really matter so much? With that, his first lesson with Roha came to an end, and he still had another class to attend. When Minji saw him, she immediately asked, were you just practicing in front of a mirror? You tried everything I taught you yesterday, right? Sang-hyun hesitantly asked her to wait for a moment. He then installed a social media app, joined Yoon Roha's official fan club, and nearly finished preparing his selfie assignment. Sang-hyun said emotionally, I didn't expect you to help me this seriously. I'm genuinely touched. Minji checked his phone and asked, you seriously don't have a social media account? Sang-hyun replied, art trainees forbidden from using social media? Minji explained, an account that only follows content without posting anything publicly is fine. She then sent Sang-hyun all of Yoon Roha's official accounts. She also warned him, don't search for any private accounts other than the official ones I sent you. Sang-hyun opened Roha's profile and began looking through it carefully. Just then, a message suddenly arrived on his phone. Yoon Roha had contacted him to inspect his selfie assignment. When Sang-hyun saw the chat filled with countless selfies of his own face, even he felt too embarrassed to keep looking. Sang-hyun had once read online that whether someone felt love or hatred, they needed to express that emotion as intensely as possible. Just then, Kelly suddenly asked why he had chosen to pursue the path of becoming an idol. Sang-hyun remembered a group he had loved as a child, especially the confidence its members displayed whenever they stood on stage. He later learned from Hyunjong that the performance he had watched was actually the group's final event before announcing its disbandment. Kelly then turned toward Hyunjong and asked why she wanted to become an idol. Hyunjong blushed and explained that when she was young, her cousin had once told her that she had a beautiful voice. Just then Minji called out, Team C, it's time to rehearse. Before leaving, Kelly smiled at Sang-hyun and said, let's go fangirling together next time. But at that moment, Sang-hyun noticed Jung Soo-ryun standing quietly nearby and wondered why she was being so unusually silent. He had expected her to spread all kinds of ridiculous rumors about what happened the previous day. After the group rehearsal ended, everyone began analyzing their weaknesses. Sang-hyun curiously asked Min-ji, "Why haven't you criticized me at all today? Did I finally improve?" Min-ji lowered her head and replied, "You actually did pretty well today, didn't you?" Sang-hyun never expected Min-ji to actually compliment him. Just then, he remembered that he still hadn't sent his selfies to Yoon Roha, so he needed to finish that assignment immediately. The following day, after Sang-hyun returned to his original male body, Roha came to find him and informed her manager that she planned to bring Sang-hyun along to observe the production set. The manager stared at her in complete disbelief. Before he knew it, Sang-hyun had followed Roha to the filming location. Staff members were constantly rushing around the set, while Sang-hyun stood quietly in a corner, watching everything with intense curiosity. Being able to see Roha doing her real job in person again was an incredibly rare opportunity. The director warned Roha that the day's schedule was extremely tight and that the shoot might be exhausting. When Sang-hyun watched Roha naturally create countless expressions in front of the camera, he had to admit that she was truly impressive. While everyone continued working, Sang-hyun carefully observed the surrounding area for anyone suspicious. Before he realized it, he had already spent an hour wandering around the set. Just then, a man wearing a suit suddenly stepped in front of him. The man looked visibly surprised when he saw Sang-hyun. Sang-hyun quickly told him, "I'll explain everything later." He then turned around and ran away. By the time Sang-hyun returned to the filming area, Roha had finished the current shoot and was taking a break. While he was speaking with her, something suddenly fell from above. Sang-hyun immediately raised his arm to shield Roha. The object that fell was a plastic water bottle. Who had thrown it from the terrace above? Determined to uncover the truth, Sang-hyun decided to investigate personally. He ran up to the terrace and burst through the door, only to find numerous staff members moving around inside. Sang-hyun located the person in charge and explained why he had come. After examining the bottle, the supervisor confirmed that it was the same brand the staff had been drinking and immediately apologized. Sang-hyun held up the bottle and asked whether anyone had been standing near the railing because it felt as though someone had deliberately thrown it. But the supervisor claimed that the wind might simply have knocked it over and added that only authorized personnel were allowed into the area. With no evidence to pursue, Sang-hyun had no choice but to return. He then asked Roha's manager whether they could request access to the nearby security footage. But she avoided the issue and claimed that surveillance wasn't her responsibility. Roha soon announced that she wasn't feeling well and canceled the scheduled self-produced content shoot so she could return home and rest. After everyone left, Sang-hyun headed to a bus stop to catch a bus home. Just then, someone suddenly called out to him from behind. Sang-hyun followed the voice and discovered Oh Baek-jun sitting inside a car. He quickly asked Baek-jun to keep everything that happened that day a secret. Baek-jun then revealed that he had spoken privately with Roha sometime earlier. Sang-hyun asked how people at the company generally viewed Yoon Roha. Baek-jun replied, "We only exchanged a few words. The people at her company should understand her much better than I do. Although it's technically a subsidiary, I don't know every detail about its situation or internal atmosphere." Just then, Sang-hyun suddenly wondered how he was supposed to explain his relationship with Han Yo-lee if anyone asked. Oh Baek-jun advised him to use an audition as an excuse for now. He could also claim that Sang-hyun was preparing to enter the entertainment industry and that Yo-lee was privately receiving his help, giving the two of them a reasonable excuse to meet. Hearing this made Sang-hyun feel like he had truly become Han Yo-lee's personal assistant. Han Yo-lee was the person performing in the spotlight, while Kim Sang-hun was the shadow controlling everything behind the scenes. Playing two different identities at once was far more difficult than he had imagined. He needed to remember exactly which person he was supposed to be at every moment. Sang-hyun stared blankly at Oh Baek-jun. He had once wondered whether anyone besides him was also using the previous life medicine. But Baek-jun smiled and replied that he was already completely satisfied with his own body and had no reason to use it. Sang-hyun never expected Baek-jun to spray the transformation perfume on him inside the car before dropping him off about 10 minutes away from the company. After all, if anyone saw Han Yo-lee stepping out of Oh Baek-jun's car, even more ridiculous rumors would begin spreading. That evening, Sang-hyun arrived at the practice room Yoon Roha had prepared for him while using Han Ya-ee's appearance. Roha suddenly mentioned Oh Baek-jun She believed that having a connection with someone of his status was already incredibly impressive for an ordinary trainee. She even wondered whether Baekjun had already begun giving Yoi's special treatment in private. Judging by Roha's expression, Sang-hyun felt that she was making the situation far more complicated than it really was. But while using Yoi's identity, he couldn't explain the truth directly. Roha even asked whether Han Yoi and Kim Sang-hyun had romantic feelings for each other. She claimed that with a face as beautiful as Yoi's, a purely platonic friendship between a man and a woman was practically impossible. She was convinced that Sang-hyun must be attracted to Yoi. Hearing someone claim that he had feelings for himself made Sang-hyun deeply uncomfortable. He quickly laughed and explained that the two of them had known each other for years, so there was no possibility of that kind of relationship. Roha then announced that their real training would officially begin that day. Sang-hyun nervously tugged at the hem of his skirt and asked, "What does making me wear a skirt have to do with the lesson?" Roha replied, "Judging by how awkwardly you're standing, you probably rarely wear this kind of clothing. You need to constantly understand what state you're presenting yourself in. I also need to study how to enhance your charm, so I deliberately added restrictions through your outfit. Honestly, that tracksuit you wear every day is unbelievably unfashionable." Roha then pulled out her phone and showed Sang-hyun videos of her previous performances. She explained that stage performances involved countless small details. The most basic ones included controlling the direction of his gaze and every joint in his fingers. If the performance required it, he needed to use everything available to him, even a single strand of hair. Sang-hyun finally understood why Roha had repeatedly told him to spend more time looking in the mirror. In the past, Han Yoi's reflection had always looked like a complete stranger, but once Sang-hyun began expressing real emotions through that face, everything started to feel natural. It seemed that Roha's instruction was genuinely effective. Sang-hyun picked up the phone and continued watching videos of her previous performances. Roha was a perfectionist. Although her personality and behavior were often controversial, everyone acknowledged her extraordinary ability. The following morning on the way to the company, Yuri complained that the other members seemed unable to get along with Han Yoi. She said that practice was already stressful enough without having to take care of someone who constantly held the team back. Yuri also claimed that the previous day was the first time she had ever seen Suryeon cry so badly, insisting that there was clearly something wrong with Han Yoi. Minji suddenly turned around and irritably told her to stop mentioning Suyeon because she already had enough problems. Yuri fell silent, unable to understand what had happened between them. When they arrived at the practice room, all the members quickly gathered and agreed to begin training in 5 minutes. Before long, beautiful music filled the room, but Courtney looked completely unfocused that day. Minji, who was standing at the front, also noticed something was wrong and pointed out that Courtney had been half a beat behind everyone else from the beginning. Park So-ae stepped forward and touched Courtney's forehead. Realizing that she was burning with fever, So-ae told her to stop practicing immediately and visit the infirmary for medicine. Suryeon worried that it would be unsafe for Courtney to go alone and offered to accompany her. But Yuri angrily shouted, "Why are you helping someone from another team? We're still practicing." Suryeon turned around impatiently. "I've already listened to you complain for 20 minutes. Can't you spare me 5? But Yuri continued insisting that the monthly evaluation was approaching and that they needed to practice more frequently than the other teams. Before long, Suryeon returned to the practice room and explained that she had taken Courtney back to the dormitory to rest. But their team now had only 4 members remaining, and the choreography was already extremely complicated. Losing even one person would throw the entire formation into chaos. Just then, Hyojong came up with an idea. They could ask instructor Hojun to temporarily fill in for Courtney, since his girl group dancing was unbelievably good. But Minji said that instructor Hojun had looked exhausted earlier, so she asked Han Yoi to personally convince him. Sang-hyun, who was sitting nearby, jumped in surprise and wondered why he had to be the one to go. At that moment, instructor Hojun was slumped weakly in his chair. He had drunk far too much with senior Jarin the previous night, and his head was still pounding. Sang-hyun soon arrived at instructor Hojun's office and gently knocked on the door. He hesitantly explained the team's situation. Hojun admitted that he was in terrible condition, but Sang-hyun explained that their choreography couldn't be practiced properly with even one member missing. Hearing this, Hojun pressed both hands against the desk and struggled to his feet. "If you're in trouble, then of course I have to help." But because he stood up too quickly, he accidentally slammed his foot into the corner of the desk. Sang-hyun then supported Hojun as they made their way to the practice room. Unfortunately, the rehearsal still made almost no progress. They could only get through it somehow for the day and practice harder once Courtney recovered tomorrow. Xiaojong had seen this situation many times before, since unexpected problems frequently happened during group rehearsals. She told everyone not to worry too much and simply focus on what they needed to do. Meanwhile, Sung-hyun secretly felt delighted because he finally had time to practice singing. But when he entered the music room, he found Park So-ae blindly searching the floor for something. Her gaze looked unusually unfocused, and she suddenly moved so close that Sung-hyun nearly jumped. So-ae quickly warned him, "Be careful, I dropped my contact lens." Sung-hyun finally understood what was happening. Though she had genuinely frightened him, he crouched down to help her search, and eventually found the contact lens lying in a corner. So-ae gratefully said, "Thank you. I almost thought I had lost it again." Sang-hyun realized that her eyesight must have always been quite poor. He suddenly remembered that the day before the previous monthly evaluation results were announced, So-ae had also gone out to buy new lenses after one of hers tore. So-ae stared at him curiously. "Have we met somewhere outside the company before?" She then joked, "My eyesight is so bad that I often can't recognize someone standing right in front of me." After sitting down on the sofa, So-ae explained that she still hadn't chosen her signature pose, so she planned to think about it while practicing the song. She believed that truly understanding the song required finding the perfect emotional focus. But because the company hadn't provided a detailed interpretation, she could only analyze the lyrics repeatedly. Sang-hyun suddenly remembered Roha saying something similar the previous day. As long as he expressed the composer's original intention accurately, the performance should remain convincing. So-ae continued by saying that she always had one question whenever she sang the song. Based only on the lyrics, it sounded like a cunning girl was pretending to joke while singing a love song to the person she liked. So-ae personally interpreted it as the girl secretly hoping that the other person would notice her feelings. But when he showed no reaction, cracks began forming in her heart, leaving her to repeatedly fall in love alone before becoming disappointed again. After listening to So-ae analyze the song for so long, Sang-hyun temporarily had no idea how to respond. He never expected the emotions behind the song to be so complicated. It seemed he would need to express them properly while singing. When So-ae noticed how late it had become, she decided to head home first. Before she left, Sang-hyun said, "I thought you had disliked me this entire time. But I'm really happy that we were able to talk like this today." So-ae replied, "I've always felt close to you, Miss Yoi. I never disliked you. I hope we can continue talking naturally like this." She then leaned closer to Sang-hyun and smiled. "You're actually pretty cute, and every day you seem more and more different from when we first met. I originally thought you were the cold and distant type." The moment she finished speaking, Sang-hyun's face turned red all the way down to his neck. So-ae then walked away, leaving an embarrassed Sang-hyun standing alone in the hallway. As So-ae continued down the hall, she noticed a beautiful woman walking directly toward her. When the woman came closer, So-ae realized that it was Yoon Roha. She immediately wondered why Roha had come there so late at night. Roha explained that she was helping a friend prepare to enter the entertainment industry. But the moment she mentioned the name Kim Sang-hyun, So-ae froze on the spot and remained speechless for several seconds. Just then, Yoon Roha opened the practice room door and stepped inside. When she noticed Sang-hyun staring into space, she asked, "Why do you look so distracted?" Sang-hyun quickly asked whether she still needed his contact information. When Roha stared at him curiously, he explained that Han Ok-on had registered a new number for Han Yoi under the company's name that morning. Roha replied, "It took you this long to exchange contact information with me, so I suppose you finally changed your mind. You haven't been a trainee for very long, have you? Anyone who knows even a little about the idol industry has heard that my public image is terrible." Sang-hyun looked up at her, realizing that Roha's mental strength was truly extraordinary. Her words reminded him of something Park So-ae had once said. After having their true feelings exposed, some people hid behind shameless behavior and turned it into a tragic defense mechanism. Sang-hyun honestly admitted, "I haven't known you for very long." Roha asked, "So you knew almost nothing about me, yet you still asked me to teach you?" Sang-hyun replied, "What celebrity would willingly accept such a troublesome request? No matter what the rumors say, I'm genuinely grateful to you." Roha then explained that she had accepted his request because just as Han Yoi lacked confidence in her facial acting, Roha herself wasn't capable of doing everything perfectly. She wasn't suited for group activities. Rather than entrusting her future to unreliable competitors, she preferred to personally develop someone capable of working well beside her. Only then did Sang-hyun learn that the new girl group he had always dreamed of joining had already been part of the company's long-term plan. No wonder Roha was so familiar with Oh Baek-jun. There was a real possibility that Sanghyun and Roha would eventually debut in the same group, with the already famous Roha serving as its center. The group's entire concept and image would probably be designed around her. The company had been preparing the new girl group specifically to complement Yoon Roha. That also explained why Jung Suryeon had been deliberately copying her. Just then, Roha leaned close to Sanghyun's ear and whispered, "The company isn't planning to turn you into my replacement, is it?" Hearing that made Sanghyun suddenly realize why he still knew almost nothing about Yoon Roha. When the survival show featuring Roha had aired and become incredibly popular, Sanghyun had dropped out of school because of the bullying incident. He spent every day lying around at home and completely cut himself off from the outside world. During that period, even seeing something related to idols filled him with anger, sadness, and pain. He couldn't help wondering whether he would have turned out differently if he had watched Roha's performances back then. The following morning, Sanghyun and the others gathered in the practice room and discovered that Yuri's team had already begun training. Courtney had also returned and was participating normally, but after several rounds of rehearsal, everyone noticed that Courtney still looked completely exhausted. Hyojong moved closer to Sanghyun and explained that the rehearsal footage clearly showed Courtney falling behind the team's rhythm. If she continued practicing like this, her physical condition would only become worse by the day of the monthly evaluation. Sanghyun wanted to discuss the problem with everyone, but he lacked both experience and seniority. Even if he offered an opinion, he doubted anyone would find it convincing, so he decided to remain silent. He assumed that Min-ji would eventually say everything he was thinking. But to Sanghyun's surprise, Min-ji simply announced that the day's rehearsal was over. She then turned and walked toward the practice room door. Just as Min-ji was about to open it, Sanghyun stepped forward and grabbed the handle. Min-ji stared at him curiously. "What's wrong? Are you unhappy with something?" Sanghyun knew that speaking up would probably earn him criticism, but someone had to say it. If no one else was willing to do it, he would be the one to ruin the mood. Are we seriously going to sit here and do nothing? Or am I the only one who thinks everyone has already decided to give up? Min-ji stared at him in surprise. "Why are you suddenly acting like this? What exactly are you unhappy about?" Sanghyun replied, "Because Courtney is sick. None of you want to criticize her, so the entire team has ended up like this." He hadn't wanted to destroy the atmosphere, and after speaking, he realized that his words might have been too harsh, but unless he acted forcefully, the team would never truly come together. Sanghyun continued, "Were you always the type to say exactly what you thought? Why are you suddenly pretending to be soft-hearted?" Min-ji looked completely frustrated. "Then what do you expect me to do?" Sanghyun turned toward Courtney and asked when she had first begun feeling unwell. They soon learned that her condition had started deteriorating 3 days earlier. Even if she recovered before the monthly evaluation, she couldn't currently handle intense training. Sanghyun asked Courtney to explain exactly what she was experiencing. She said the normal group choreography was manageable, but once the repeated movements began in the second half, her stamina rapidly disappeared and her rhythm became slower. Hearing this gave Sanghyun a bold idea. They could move Courtney to the back and let her remain mostly in place while singing. It wouldn't look unnatural, and she could preserve enough stamina to finish the performance. Sanghyun would take over Courtney's solo dance section. Even with little rehearsal time remaining, the adjusted difficulty should still be manageable. However, Min-ji still didn't fully support Sanghyun's proposal. With no other choice, Sanghyun explained that he had never wanted anyone to call him a burden to the team. So he had already memorized every member's choreography. Now, that effort could finally be useful. He said firmly, "If you don't believe me, I can prove it right now." Everyone else remained silent, unwilling to make a decision too quickly. After discussing it together, the team eventually accepted Sanghyun's proposal and decided that he and Min-ji would each perform half of the solo dance section. That afternoon, the company held a midterm evaluation, and the team performed using its newly adjusted formation. Only Park So-ae and Hyojong remained in their original positions, while every other member's placement had noticeably changed. Courtney continued blaming herself for failing to manage her condition and causing trouble for the team. After the midterm evaluation ended, the atmosphere finally became a little more relaxed. Sanghyun then went to a vending machine and bought a can of soda. But after taking a sip, he noticed that it tasted strange. Had the drink gone bad, or was his transformation somehow affecting his sense of taste? His preferences had never changed since the transformation began. He considered throwing it away, but wasting an entire can after only one sip felt ridiculous. Just then, Cha Gong-won suddenly came up beside him and said, "You can give it to me, if you don't want it." Sanghyun glanced sideways at him, before turning around and walking away without a word, leaving Gong-won staring after him in surprise. Gongwon suddenly shouted, "Wait," and hurried after him. But the next moment, a sensation like an electric shock rushed through Sanghyun's body. Gongwon had grabbed his wrist from behind, making Sanghyun cry out in pain. Gongwon immediately realized that he had probably used too much strength. Sanghyun turned around and glared fiercely at him. But Gongwon spoke with complete sincerity. "I came to apologize. I was rude to you on the rooftop, but now I've hurt you again. I suppose your opinion of me is even worse now." Sanghyun finally understood why he had approached. In truth, he had never taken the rooftop incident that seriously. Still, when he listened closely, Gongwon's voice was undeniably attractive. Sanghyun quickly replied, "I was also overly sensitive that day. I was in a bad mood because of some personal problems." Just then, he remembered the rumors he had heard the previous day. He cautiously asked Gongwon, "There's something I'd like to ask you about. Could we speak privately?" To his surprise, Gongwon immediately agreed. "Of course. Let's talk over there." He pointed toward the emergency exit. Sanghyun curiously asked, "Why do we need to talk in the emergency stairwell? Weren't you extremely worried about someone seeing us on the rooftop before?" Gongwon replied, "Don't worry. No one ever comes here, so we won't be discovered." He then suddenly asked, "But why were you avoiding me earlier?" Sanghyun immediately became nervous, wondering why Gongwon would ask such a question. Sweat began forming across his body as he stammered, "Because I was embarrassed." Gongwon burst out laughing. "I never expected you to react so strongly around me. Being disliked by an unbelievably beautiful woman is certainly a new experience." Seeing Han Yoi approach him first made Gongwon secretly confident. Whatever her reason might be, the outcome had already been decided the moment she started speaking to him. Sanghyun stared at Gongwon's calculating expression and cursed inwardly. "Idiot, do you really think I can't tell what you're planning?" No matter how embarrassing this became, Sanghyun needed to endure it and find a way to obtain information about Yoon Roha. But neither of them realized that they were both approaching the conversation with completely different hidden motives. Gongwon said, "Let's sit on the stairs. Our legs will get tired if we keep standing." To Sanghyun's surprise, Gongwon removed his jacket and spread it across the cold step. The two of them sat down and began with a few casual remarks. Sanghyun turned toward him and asked, "How much do you know about Senior Yoon Roha?" The man quickly waved his hands. "We've never even spoken. I feel like we wouldn't get along. And she's not really my type." At first, I also assumed she would be fairly easy to deal with. But later, I heard from company employees and people at the shop that she was extremely difficult to approach. There are even rumors that her real personality is worse than the image people already have of her. The conversation had finally shifted toward Yoon Roha, exactly as Sanghyun intended. But for some reason, hearing those comments made him uncomfortable. Was it because he had been spending more time with Roha recently? The man continued, "Judging by the way you act, you don't seem like someone with a terrible personality either. I heard that she's been especially sensitive lately because of certain problems and has no energy left to care about the people around her. There's also a rumor that everything happening to her was actually staged by Roha herself. But why would she do something like that at such an important time? Could she be planning to leave the idol industry?" Sanghyun stared at him in disbelief. But the man continued speculating. Maybe she simply lost interest after doing it for a while. Or perhaps she realized that this career didn't suit her. Sanghyun couldn't help responding. "I suppose it's easy to think that way. But are you only saying this because you reached your current position so easily that you assume everyone else can do the same?"